Good evening. Welcome to the July 22nd, 2019 Troy City Council meeting. We are pleased this evening to have Councilman Pennington lead us in the invocation, so please rise for that and then remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. We have a special treat this evening to lead us in the pledge.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day, and we thank you for a break from the hot weather. We pray that you guide this council in the decisions that we make tonight, and we pray that you continue to protect our friends and family in the police department and the fire department. We thank you for all these opportunities that you've given us, and pray that in your name, amen.
Amen. Now I would ask Cub Scout Pack 1711 from Sussex Elementary School to come forward and lead us in the invocation.
Pledge.
Or the Pledge of Allegiance. Turn towards the flag. Ready? I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Well done. Thank you for coming tonight. Troy City Council meeting is now called to order. The roll call, Ms. Dixon.
Mayor Slater?
Here.
Councilmember Abraham?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Baker?
Here.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Here.
Councilmember Henderson?
Here.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Here.
Councilmember Pennington?
Here.
All present. First on the agenda are certificates of recognition and special presentations. We have one C1 as a proclamation celebrating 20 years of the Troy Quilters Group, and if I could ask them to come forward to the microphone, I'd like to present a proclamation this evening. So it's an honor and a privilege for me to present this proclamation celebrating 20 years to the Troy Quilters Group. And I'd be honored to read this into the record because I think it's a wonderful thing for our community. Whereas the Troy Quilters began as a group in the Troy Community Center in 1999. The original quilters were Judy Baker, Alva German, Shirley Guggen, Marie Jacques, Lucy Lesperance, Vera McCarthy, Shirley Williams, and Cynthia Wilshire. Over 200 quilters have attended through the years. They have lost some of the quilters' Rainbow Bridge, some disappear in the winter, some in the summer, but they try to stick together, supporting each other in a time of need, times of loss, and of course happy times too. And whereas the Troy Quilters call themselves a senior group, I'm not sure why, not a club, but don't check their birth certificates. A couple of their members are 30-somethings, and Marie Jacques will be 99 years young on Christmas Day 2019. They all welcome all quilters. Through the years, approximately half of the members, give or take, are Troy residents. The others are from southeast Michigan cities. There is no charge, and they welcome all levels of quilters. And whereas the Troy Quilters do not teach classes, they all carry their own sewing machines and work on their own projects. They critique each other, ooh and ah, when they show off finished work. And when someone learns a new technique, it gets shared with everyone who wants to learn. And whereas the Troy Quilters still have several members of the original core group, active, still quilting, and showing up for good times and fellowship, sharing knowledge, patterns, skills, tools, fabric, and welcoming all new quilters. And whereas the Troy Quilters are also into community service, donating quilts for fundraising and fundraisers to local service organizations. Some make angel quilts and neonatal department quilts for hospitals. Some make quilts for children's homes, domestic violence shelters, pillowcases and quilts for nursing homes and cancer groups, veterans and military hospitals, Ronald McDonald houses, and items for the local police departments to carry for young accident victims. And whereas many of the Troy Quilters are members of local, regional, and national quilt guilds, including Cameo Quilt Guild, Great Lakes Heritage Quilt Guild, Quilt Guild of Metro Detroit, Oakland County Quilt Guild, Macomb County Quilt Guild, try and say that.
You're in trouble, yeah.
Greater Ann Arbor Quilt Guild, and American Quilters Society. Many of the quilters exhibit in local quilt shows and some on national shows. They have exhibited their work in the Troy Community Center, at the Troy Garden Walk, and participated in Threads, a celebration of quilts at the Troy Historic Village in 2017. So now, therefore, it be resolved that the Troy City Council does hereby congratulate the Troy Quilters on its 20th anniversary and recognizes its impact upon not only the membership, but the entire community. And be it further resolved that the Troy City Council joins the citizens of this community in appreciation and celebration of the Troy Quilters' 20th anniversary as they enter into their future with dedication of preserving the love of quilting. Quilters are invited to join them Wednesday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the Troy Community Center. This proclamation is signed by myself and all members of the City Council. It's our honor to present this proclamation celebrating 20 years of Troy Quilters Group. Thank you so much for what you've done for our community and what you do for those in need. Thank you so much. Want to say something? No? No. They wanted me to say that it's not just for women. So come on in here. Come on in here. Oh, I'd be honored.
Thank you.
Will do.
My tickets, not tickets.
That concludes those that have signed up for certificates of recognition or that have been part of this section of the agenda. We'll give them a minute to work their way out. There are no carryover items this evening, so we will move to public hearings. And before we start the public hearings, I see that we're going to have several speakers this evening, so I just want to go over the ground rules regarding speaking during City Council comment. There's a timer up here that will turn green when the speaker has 3 minutes. When there's 1 minute remaining, the light will turn yellow. Please try to start wrapping it up at that point, and when the red light comes on, that will be the time period to stop speaking for public comment. Please keep your remarks to the City Council table. There will be no interaction between the speaker and council. This is an opportunity to express your opinions and concerns to City Council. So the first public hearing is E1, a rezoning application, file number ZJPLN2019-0015, which is the proposed Big Beaver rezoning the east side of McClure, north of Big Beaver Road, Sidwell, number 88-2020-476-007-008 and 009. This is section 20 from R1B, one family residential, to BB, which is Big Beaver zoning district, site type C, street type C. I see Brent Savanant, our community development director, is ready and looking forward to tonight, right, Brent?
I can't wait, Mr. Mayor. Can't wait.
Good evening, Brent.
Good evening, Mayor Slater and City Council. Before I get into this PowerPoint presentation, Mr. Mayor, there are two public hearings before us this evening, both for rezonings. Because they're tied so closely together, both in terms of ownership and proximity, they're essentially the same slide presentation. So what I was proposing this evening was to go into to present this slide presentation in a little bit more detail, and when I present for the Alpine site, I would summarize it. It would be significantly shorter in an effort to save time, if that's okay with you and City Council.
I think that's appreciated.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. Very, very brief summary. This it's fairly bright up here. The subject site is comprised of 3 residential lots in totals 2.5 acres in size. And as you indicated, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. The applicant seeks rezoning from one family residential to Big Beaver. The applicant has not volunteered any conditions as part of this application, so this is not a conditional rezoning. This is what we refer to as just a straight rezoning or a rezoning, where there's no conditions volunteered, there's no site plan volunteered. So if rezoned, in the future, the applicant would have to come back with a site plan application or special use application, depending what the use is, but would be able to develop anything under the Big Beaver zoning district. And I'll get into that in a few slides here. Surrounding land uses to the north and to the west are single-family residential homes. To the south is an existing office and parking lot, and to the east is a parking lot for a large office building. In terms of zoning, to the north is single-family residential, to the east and south is Big Beaver, and to the west is a planned unit development, or PUD. Our rezoning application process requires that the applicant provide a concept plan as part of it, as a courtesy, so that we can be made aware, that residents and staff and City Council can be made aware of what the general intent could be for this application. They provided a concept plan showing a 3-story mixed-use building and a 3-story apartment building, but this is simply a concept plan. It is non-binding, and the applicant would have the right, if rezoned, to scrap that concept plan and come back with something else. Greater in scope, less in scope, or could come back with something very similar. We don't know. So the application states that, I'll read this quickly. Development is not proposed at this time since the uses will be tied directly into the requirements of the Big Beaver district. Once rezoned to Big Beaver, market research will be conducted to see which of the permitted uses are feasible given the form-based zoning site requirements. So that's an explanation of what they intend to do. They provided the concept plan as a courtesy, but as you can see, they're really not committed to that concept. On the right is a table of permitted uses. There's a wide range of uses permitted in the Big Beaver zoning district. They range from residential, both single-family detached and multiple family. It includes medical office, general office, places of worship, funeral homes, veterinary clinics, theaters, restaurants, and personal service uses. So a very wide range of uses. More importantly, this site type at this location permits up to a 6-story and 72-foot high building on this site. There's no limit in terms of the density. The limitation is solely based on the height of the building, as well as whatever is proposed can be parked on that site. So in terms of the master plan, you see the location of the site is marked here in yellow. So the site is located within the Big Beaver zoning, the Big Beaver land use classification in the master plan, and that classification does promote redevelopment, and it promotes mixed use. It encourages the use of ground floor retail, cafes, restaurants, and truly engaging visitors to the district. Page 48 of the Big Beaver Corridor Study, which was approved as part of the master plan, delineates this site specifically as mixed-use retail, office, and residential. This is the building height plan from the Big Beaver Corridor Plan, which again was incorporated in the master plan. And this shows how the plan is intended at this location to transition the intensity. So this is Big Beaver here, and notice the higher the higher buildings are along Big Beaver, and the height and the use transitions downwards as you move away from the Big Beaver corridor. So notice the single-family residential district, the intent is to get significant height and intensity along Big Beaver, and then reduce that height and intensity as one moves away from Big Beaver. The reality is, we haven't seen this type of the intense development along Big Beaver. In 2012, the Big Beaver Center PUD was approved. This is located fronting on Big Beaver between Alpine and McClure. It's 1 story in height, and it's got some massing and some height increases in the facade to give it an impression that's a little bit more of a massing, but it is 1 story. In 2016, Eddie V's restaurant was approved. Another 1-story building. This is located at the corner of Alpine and Big Beaver. So we haven't seen this significant height transitioning away from Big Beaver. We've actually seen somewhat akin to the opposite of that. What does this mean? This means that a 6-story, 72-foot tall building located closer to the residential neighborhood is not consistent with this intent. Let's talk about depth for a moment. On the left is the master plan. This is just a snapshot capturing the area that we're talking about. Notice the depth proposed for the Big Beaver land use classification. It's a little bit north of Banmore, and it goes all the way across. This is what the master plan called for in 2008. In 2011, when we comprehensively rewrote the zoning ordinance, we didn't take that Big Beaver classification all the way up. We left it as single-family residential. We talked about this at Planning Commission at length, and we decided not to be heavy-handed and rezone all this property for a number of reasons. One, although we made great strides to inform the public of our efforts in updating the master plan, people generally don't pay a lot of attention to it, and we did not want to give people the feeling in the future that we rezone the property out from under their feet. Conversely, we didn't want to scare people and have this become a significant issue, rezoning people's property, and then making this become the focus of the master plan, and basically putting the brakes to the master plan process and stalling the whole process because of this. So what we decided to do was, on a case-by-case basis, to process applications for rezoning. The master plan in concept would support the rezonings, but we would consider each on a case-by-case basis using the conditional rezoning applications. That was actually discussed. So to summarize the master plan, a rezoning to Big Beaver may be compatible with the master plan. However, the applicant submitted only a concept plan without any conditions, and it is a non-binding concept plan. Due to the unknown future use, intensity, and scale of the site, compatibility to the master plan cannot be determined. and compatibility with adjacent properties cannot be determined. The standards for rezoning are listed in section 16.03C of the zoning ordinance. Applying findings of fact to the standards in 1603C, we come up with the following. Due to the unknowns of the future development of the site, we find that the rezoning standards have not been met for these reasons. If the rezoning is approved, the applicant is not bound to the concept plan. Due to the unknown future use, intensity, and scale of the site, compatibility with the master plan cannot be determined. Compatibility with adjacent properties cannot be determined. The site is located on an interior lot without frontage on or direct access to Big Beaver Road. The development potential of the site for a building up to 6 stories and 72 feet in height would not be compatible with adjacent properties to the north and to the west. There are a number of uses permitted in the Big Beaver District that are not compatible with adjacent land uses. Due to the unknown future use, the impact on public health, safety, and welfare cannot be determined. And finally, due to the unknown future use, the ability to provide public services and facilities cannot be determined. So an overall recommendation, as I indicated in the previous slide, the rezoning standards have not been met. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on this item on May 28, 2019, recommended denial 5-3. City management recommends denial of the proposed rezoning from R1B to Big B. And I would add one thing further, Mr. Mayor. Protest petition was submitted today, and we reviewed the application, the petition, excuse me, and made a finding that it is a valid protest petition. It exceeds the 20% benchmark for opposition. Therefore, approval of this rezoning request requires a supermajority vote or 5 this evening. Now, I can answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Any questions from council for Mr. Sabadan? Councilman Henderson?
I have one. In my tenure here, I don't recall having something fail Planning Commission, have management say they don't approve it, and then come to City Council. Is that typical? Is there precedent for that?
Nothing comes to mind, Councilman Henderson. However, state law requires that rezoning applications have a public hearing at Planning Commission. Planning Commission makes a recommendation. It can be in support or denial, and they do. It still goes before City Council as per state law and as per our zoning ordinance. So it's contemplated under our zoning ordinance and under state law.
Okay.
Any questions for Brent? Thank you, Brent. At this point, I am going to open the public hearing E1. I'll give an opportunity. Does the petitioner wish to speak at this point?
Yes.
Please come forward. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Robert Carson, 4111 Andover, Bloomfield Hills, Michigan. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, and we're going to have a presentation. I'll have a few brief remarks, then we have our planner that is here, and then I'll come back after that to both finish and answer questions if that's acceptable. In connection with just the procedure, the city planner or development director obviously talked about the similarities of the two rezonings. I too do not want to belabor the point. I can tell you what we did at Planning Commission if it's not clear to anybody, which is after the first presentation was made, which was fulsome, and I requested that in order to eliminate the duplicity, or duplication, I should say, duplication, of the presentations and having it stretch out for time, we incorporated, I asked, and there was a formal resolution adopted by the Planning Commission to incorporate the general comments that were made with respect to the first presentation, and then we only highlighted the differences because there's so much similarity and it saves all that time. I'm going to make that same request either now or at the time of the second, but hopefully we'll get a similar resolution to not belabor it for the council and for the audience also. But they would have their own time to do the specifics of the second. At the mayor's discretion, I can address that now, or we can wait till the second if you wish.
We can wait till the second, thank you.
Okay, we are here tonight and pleased to be here in order to bring to the city of Troy its goal and aspiration for this site. We'll talk about McClure first, it'll be the same for Alpine. That is, the goal of the city has been expressed in the master plan. And the master plan for this area, and as you have seen with the schematic that was put up, for an area even to the north of this property. This property is not on the northern border of the master plan site. Now, what I'd like to highlight is that people refer to the master plan as the 2008 master plan. The master plan has been updated a couple of times, most recently in 2016. And in each of those circumstances, the goal of the city, as expressed in the master plan, has consistently designated this area as BB. Now, Mr. Aventini, who is expert in the area of zoning and principally represents municipalities, are going to speak in detail to your ordinances. I do want to point out, however, that we will go through and each of the criteria for rezoning has been met by our application. Every single criteria. Consistency with the master plan, adequate utilities and services for the site must have been, because this area was designated under a PUD for a 25-story building. These buildings that'll go here are substantially less, will call upon less by way of public services, etc. It is going to be compatible, and there's no doubt about that. And the reason it's going to be compatible, as you will hear from Mr. Aventini, is that the city of Troy has adopted form-based zoning. And that list of potential horror stories of all the things that could go in the BB area is not applicable to this site. Because this site is a C site, and its uses are specifically limited in the zoning ordinance to only a few potential areas. And that'll be covered under the form-based zoning. So therefore, one of the criteria of form-based zoning is the Planning Commission, when it goes back, it makes sure that the site is compatible and fits within the very limited types of developments that can go there, both by the type and both by the form. That's the whole point of that. So all the criteria has been met. That's the first thing. The second thing is there is no requirement in the law for rezoning, none whatsoever, that it be a conditional rezoning only. And by the way, with respect to these properties, or at least one of the properties, a conditional rezoning was brought forward. It was passed by the Planning Commission 7-0, and it was rejected by this council. So there has not been a great experience with respect to this applicant with conditional rezoning, and it is not legal to require it. There is no requirement in the law that a presentation be made by conditional rezoning. Additionally, it is highly unusual to ask for a concept plan in a rezoning. It is in Troy's ordinances, and we have complied with that, but no one's bound by it. It's just an exercise to say, this is something that could happen there, just to meet the criteria. It is not what's going to go there. What's going to go there, according to the ordinance that you have adopted, is something that's compatible with and meets the criteria of the form-based zoning for this particular site. So with that, I would like to have Mr. Aventini, our planner, come back, and then I'll come up, and then I'll come back.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for the time.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. Mayor, members of council, I'm Carmen Aventini. I'm the president of CIB Planning. We're a small consulting firm located in the city of Fenton. I have over 35 years experience in planning and zoning, and we're primarily a firm that works with communities, but occasionally we will take on a private client when what they're seeking aligns with our principles of our firm. I think also important to note is that I am one of the trainers for the Michigan Economic Development Corporation's Redevelopment Ready Communities program, of which you're in the process right now. In fact, Mark and Brent took my course. And what I teach is I talk about zoning, development review processes, how to speed them up, and also about form-based codes and how to use them. So we do provide planning assistance across the state through the Redevelopment Ready Communities program. So as you know, our client is requesting to have this site rezoned to BB Big Beaver District. And as you've heard, the staff has indicated that we are not requesting a conditional rezoning, and they want to see it on a case-by-case basis. But the ordinance does identify standards that have to be met for any rezoning request, and that's what we focused on, were those standards that are in there. Now, with the conditional rezoning request, one of the submission requirements in the ordinance is a written statement prepared by the applicant that confirms a conditional rezoning agreement was proposed by the applicant and entered into voluntarily. And the reason this is important is because basically if he did agree to go along and do a conditional rezoning, he really truthfully couldn't sign that statement because he didn't offer conditional rezoning voluntarily. He would be pushed into it. And then as Mr. Carson already indicated, he has already gone through a conditional rezoning process for the same site with full Planning Commission approval and didn't get it. So at the Planning Commission meeting, there was concern by some commissioners that without the conditional rezoning, it would be an unknown commodity. And that was the term that was used by some, and not sure of what they would be getting. But the subject site being located in a form-based code district, as it is, basically regulates the height, regulates the uses, and given the size of the property, it would fall, as Mr. Carson indicated, fall into the smallest category. So some of the concerns about having a 6-story building and some of those uses that were indicated broadly across the form-based code really wouldn't apply here. So really what the form-based code Big Beaver District is intended to do exactly what the Big Beaver Corridor Study and future land use plan call for, and that is to ensure reasonable transition between higher intensity development and the adjacent neighborhoods. That's what it's there for to do. And so standards are in there that they would have to comply with. And the other thing we had talked about at the Planning Commission also is the fact that this is not approved administratively. If they go in under the form-based code, they have to go back for site plan approval with the Planning Commission. And there are other standards in the ordinance that also have to be followed. So you've got a safeguard in there also, if it were in the form-based code district, to make sure that all of the ordinance requirements are being complied with. The city also has the ability to designate this site BBC minor site. So when the rezoning is enacted, it would automatically become a minor site and would have to comply with all of these stringent requirements for the smaller sites. So when you look at the use table, there's on page 139 of the zoning ordinance, you can see that there are many not permitted uses that were included in the letter, that in the review that shows which uses could happen here. They're not all allowed there. The dimensional requirements of the ordinance will also limit what they can do there. As you know, there are folks who come in and request rezoning to certain districts, and then you say, well, there's a lot of different things that they could put in there. But when you really apply the dimensional standards of the ordinance, you can't put all of those in there. You might not be able to meet the parking requirements. You might not be able to meet the setback requirements. So it's not like you can just put whatever is in there. You have to still comply with all the dimensional standards of the ordinance too. So not knowing what the intended use is really not a reason for denying this, because the form-based code is, and that's what it's intended to do, is going to dictate what you can and can't do pretty stringently in that district. Now, one criteria of the ordinance with the traditional rezoning requirements is compliance with the master plan. As Mr. Carson indicated, there's a lot of thought that went into putting the master plan together. Your planning commission and your staff and the consultants did a good job. It's very thorough. It's a good master plan. And he's also right that there are times when folks don't show up when the master plan is being prepared, and it's not until there's, you know, an issue that hits close to home that you'll hear the comments against whatever is being proposed. But as an applicant and representing an applicant, it's all we can do is follow the ordinance standards. And that's what we're here to do, follow the ordinance standards that you have in place. And once again, the purpose of the ordinance is to implement the master plan. That's the primary reason for having both of those documents. I would also like to state too is that the site is clearly identified in the master plan and all the supporting studies as Big Beaver Road. And as you saw up in the map there, it's not even on the farthest edge. It's right next to the sites that are located in fronting on Big Beaver Road. As far as the public health, safety, and welfare, by rezoning the site to form-based Big Beaver District, the ordinance requirements are in place to make sure that that standard is being met. In fact, if you look at the rezoning, the previous review letters too, on the previous request, you'll see that that's admitted in there that this particular district helps to ensure that the public health, safety, and welfare is protected adequately. And finally, the rezoning will ensure compatibility with the adjacent uses of land. Once again, the form-based Big Beaver District was carefully considered and based upon years of planning and consideration through preparation of the master plan, the Big Beaver Corridor Study, and subsequent updates, including the one in 2016. So the uses are absolutely dictated by that form-based code. So in conclusion here, one more point too. I could also point to any district in the zoning ordinance that you have and find uses that are not appropriate. And you could look at almost any ordinance and find that. For example, agriculture is a permitted use in the single-family residential districts. Does that mean somebody's going to put agriculture on a single-family residential lot? No. In all likelihood, they can't meet all of the dimensional and other standards of the ordinance. So just because something could be permitted in a zoning district doesn't mean in reality that's going to happen like that. So in conclusion, the proposed rezoning does match the master plan using the BBC small sites designation in the ordinance. Conditional rezoning does run contrary to the intent of a form-based code. The intent of a form-based code is to make it easier to go through the process. The intent is we've got all of the council, planning commission, and the public, all of your thoughts and ideas more than normal in a zoning ordinance, and we put them up front in a form-based code. And we say, this is what we want it to look like, these are the uses we want, and ultimately this is what, if you come in and give that to us, it's going to make it easier for you to go through the development review process. Well, conditional rezonings are not easy. And if you add that on top of the form-based code, it really defeats the purpose for having a form-based code. So it does make the process, and one of the things I wanted to point out too is with a conditional rezoning, it makes what we consider the ordinance to be unpredictable, expensive, and time-consuming, and discourages new investment in the city. And that's one of the things that I think it's one of your tenets of future growth in the community is to make sure that those things take place. Well, conditional rezoning doesn't do that. And finally, this is it. It's on page 10 of the master plan. Identifies the 10 tenets of smart growth, and the one is make development decisions predictable, fair, and cost effective. And so making us go back through a already unpredictable process, again, for this particular property, does not make this a smooth and predictable process. It just makes it very frustrating for the applicant. So I'll turn it back over to Bob in case you have any other questions.
Thank you.
I'll try to keep this part short, but I do want to make sure that we have covered a few things that I think many of the comments that have been made in the past and may be concerns to each of you is there's so much uncertainty as to what might happen here. And that is not the case. And what I want you to make sure that everybody understands what was highlighted with respect to form-based zoning. And the concept of form-based zoning is that the criteria is already been established that limits what can be developed and in what intensity can be developed. And it restricts, in addition to that, the uses. So you have a use restriction which is very limited for this C class, very limited. And then you have a form base, which is a separate part, which limits the construction, or the buildings, or the size, or the setbacks. And I refer you to, with specificity, to page 139 of your ordinance. It's under section 5, which has to do with form-based districts. And on page 139, there are two charts. One relates to uses, one relates to the form. And in those charts, very few items are allowed. The types of things that are allowed are limited in number and intensity, and the form is limited in construction. And the whole idea of this is to give effect to your master plan and restrict uses. It is not a situation where you would zone normally for retail or commercial, and you could do a shopping center. There's no shopping center that's going to go here. There's no hospital that's going to go here. So if you look at your own criteria, it is very, very limited in scope. And the concept of having compatibility is assured by the form-based zoning. And the size and scope is assured by the form-based zoning. And therefore, what we have today is people have said they're really concerned that all these other things could happen there. It's not the case. I think most of the public comment, aside from the fact that everybody has some insecurity as to what eventually may go there, there's a whole lot of security that can be placed if somebody had studied the form-based zoning and the criteria that's established for this C area. So the city of Troy has done a couple of things. And by the way, this idea of the efficacy of form-based zoning is not just something that we've brought up and not something that's been new. In 2011, when the concept was brought up, I have extra copies if anybody wants this, but Carlisle Wharton, which is your outside planner, wrote a blog that they published extolling the virtues of it and how Troy, by adopting it, had made the concept inviting and predictable. Predictable for the council, predictable for the neighbors, and predictable for somebody who wants to develop to enhance the goal of the city of Troy. So Troy has invited this application. And I mean that sincerely. Troy has adopted the master plan. It establishes in writing the goal for this property and property to the north of it. And Troy has adopted form-based zoning, which limits what can go on this property, highly restricts it. And instead of having the approval on the form-based zoning once it's rezoned, administratively, Troy took the extra step and said, you must go back for site plan approval to the Planning Commission, and you must do a plan that's in conformity to the form-based zoning, which assures compatibility. Now, what was highlighted here was a retail strip center that's out between the two properties, actually, right up against single-family residential with a relatively short wall. And two parking lots. Could we actually bring up the site map again? Is that possible? So I think while the map is coming up, I think it's worth looking at where this property is situated. And if you go to do you have the Google Earth kind of that showed the earlier picture? This is the retail center that's right up against residential with a short masonry wall in a parking lot right next to it. Now, it's Eddie V's. I thought there was one that actually showed, well,
I haven't studied these.
Okay, be that as it may. Oh, there we go, for McClure. Okay, here we go. What I want to point out is, I believe this is McClure, this is single family, this is master planned in this area above where this particular property is located, is still master planned for BB. And look what's going on here and here, all of which is visible, all of which is intense, all the way along. And on the other side, you have higher buildings. So screening in this area with a transitional use that's compatible to the form-based zoning actually creates a buffer and is more appropriate and is in compliance with the invitation that's been given by the city. So you can see all of this that's right up against these houses, all of this along heavy use along Big Beaver, and these uses are fairly intense. And this, all these parking lots sort of connect, which is, I guess, the goal. It's been expressed in the master plan and part of the ordinances. So I want you to realize what's really going on here. This is not out of the clear blue sky. Now, I know some people have said, well, we don't have sidewalks. There are sidewalks in some of the areas, and there could be sidewalks along any of these roads if they wanted them. Nobody is interested in going way up in here with other development or the consequences of it. So with that in mind, and I'm happy if anybody wants the blog out of, I'll make it available, from Carlisle Wortman. So the whole planning process for the city and the adoption of the ordinance says, come here, we will do this if you meet our goals. And if your development eventually is restricted as our ordinance is, we can take assurance that it will not be too intense, it will be compatible, that's one of the criteria. And the Planning Commission, in approving a site plan, will give you the assurance of that. Unless you have any questions of me, I think that that essentially covers it.
Thank you. Any questions from council? Councilwoman Hoderick?
If you can put that image back up.
That one?
Yes, thank you. The red square indicates where you're talking about rezoning. To
Correct.
the left,
This is a PUD.
but right now, what is that?
There's single-family residential PUD, recently done.
So that's a residential street, correct? I want to make sure that I'm remembering exactly what I'm looking at here, because I've
This is-
gone and stood there, and I remember looking, just to make sure. So that's Satchin Way, and those are all residential homes on Satchin Way.
This
correct?
thing right here?
Yes.
Yes, it's the PUD, single-family residential.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Single-family residential, done as a PUD, essentially down-zoned from the tall, prior approved PUD, which I think was 25 stories.
Which happened because the economy tanked,
We all lived through it.
right? And this area has lived through that and evolved and changed. And I just wanted to make sure that people understood when they're looking at that that's residential, that's right there.
It's changed, but it has not changed since 2016, when the master plan was last reviewed in detail and approved without a change in the master plan for this property and property to the north of it. So this area to the north in here is still master planned for BB, and that has been approved in 2016. So it's not a 2008 master plan. They went through the analysis then, and that's when it was approved. I have copies of the resolutions approving it. But you're correct, that's single-family
I
residential.
understand. I'm just saying the reality when you go and visit there and stand there, just for reference to make sure that we're all singing from the same hymn book about what's there. That's not a parking lot there. That was
No, the
residential.
parking lot, actually, if you're looking for, I'll leave it to everybody's judgment as to whether this parking lot connecting to all these parking lots with a masonry wall off a retail use and a little taller office building uses is a great benefit to single-family residential, which was put in right there, up against this commercial activity, which would not be going here with the same intensity. It doesn't qualify for it. So you have a restricted use that may be a transition and a buffer, certainly a buffer For instance, if this was mid-rise, low-rise, multiple, which couldn't be that dense because it has to park, it would buffer and screen this entire area. It would be a bulwark against this entire area as you come into that center. And that's what the master plan calls for, and that's the benefit, one of the benefits that can be achieved.
Any other questions, Councilman? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Mayor.
Councilwoman Ayler.
My question's actually for Mr. Sabadan.
Okay.
Okay, I'll leave.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor,
Mr. Miller?
Honorable Mayor and Council, I just want to make a clarification. Mr. Carson made a misstatement. The residences on Sashin Way are single-family residential, but they were part of the same PUD in which the retail was built by Ark and Jonah. He did mention the previous Monarchs PUD, which was never built.
Correct.
I didn't mean to imply that it was one or two PUDs or what Arkin did on Big Beaver, but it is still a PUD.
It was all one parcel. It was all one project with Arkin.
Okay, but it's still, it is what it is by way of uses and a PUD. Thank you.
Thank you.
I need a fisherman's friend here. But ask away.
All right, I'll ask slowly to give you a little time. Mr. Carson and Mr. Avantini made reference to a District BBC, a minor site. When you look at the application, it shows District BB. It doesn't reference a C or minor site. So can you tell us a little bit more about what a minor site designation is and whether that's part of the normal application process?
Yeah, I want to confirm something that was stated. Oops. Sorry, Bob. The Big Beaver zoning district, it's a form-based district, and it determines the building forms that are permitted on a specific site and the use is permitted on a specific site based on the site type and the street type of the property. This property has not been rezoned yet. So what we decided made the most sense was continuing the classification of the street type for McClure as it goes north as a type C street type, which is Big Beaver's A, which is a 204-foot wide right-of-way, which allows for significant intensity and the entire range of uses permitted in that district. B would allow for somewhat less intensity, less height, and C even less because of the proximity, because basically of the size of the properties and proximity to single-family residential. Obviously, this is right abutting single-family residential. So if rezoned, this would be site type C, which is the smallest and least intense, and street type C, which is the narrowest type of street with the least amount of traffic volume on it. This table that is in the report, and I incorporated also in the PowerPoint presentation, I want to be clear on this. The list of uses in this table is a list of uses that would be permitted on this site if rezoned to site type C and street type C. These would be permitted, period. Okay? I want to be clear on that. We didn't get really exuberant and really go nuts throwing uses to the PowerPoint presentation. These are permitted if rezoned to C and C. Okay. That 6-story, 72-foot height would be permitted at this location, street type C, site type C, period. Okay? The density limit would be determined based on the type of use and the building height. And 6 stories and 72 feet, you got to park it, but guess what? We allow parking decks in this zoning district. In fact, if rezoned, we have a QDI program, we'd probably end up helping fund the parking deck as a city. They qualify. if it was if it was part of the DDA. I want to be clear on that. Did I answer your question?
Yes, that was very clear. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I do have one other question.
Oh, sure.
for you. There was also a comment made about sidewalks and that sidewalks could be put in if so desired. My recollection is that that would be a special assessment and residents would have to pay for those sidewalks. Is that a correct recollection?
For a sidewalk for this project?
Or on McClure itself?
Well, for...
Mr. Salmon, I'll handle that question.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, it would have to be a special assessment, and I believe that is a substandard road too, with 50-foot right-of-way, and probably have to fill the ditches, and it would be a substantial cost. And we may need easements in certain situations because of the 50-foot right-of-way.
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
Any questions for Brent? At this point, I'm going to open it up for public comment. I see that looks like 8 residents have signed up to speak, so I'll call on each resident. Please pay attention to the timer. When the green light starts, begin your comments, and when the yellow light comes on, please start to wrap it up, please. So I'll first call on Linda Minster, Troy resident who wishes to speak on this item. Good evening.
Hi, good evening. I'm speaking against the proposal. My name is Linda Winborn Minster. I live at 3365 Crooks Road. My family has owned this home since 1947, so I've seen a lot. I remember my mom would have to wait while the cows from Brooks Farm crossed Big Beaver before we could proceed ahead. I remember teenage boys on horseback riding down Banmore to get a date with my older sister, and we used to ice skate on Banmore in the winter. I don't expect to bring back those days as pleasant as they were, and I don't want to inhibit progress either. I do want, however, to give you an understanding from our perspective. My husband and I are located on the corner of Banmore and Crooks, where the action begins from this direction. We have cars that whip around the corner from Crooks going up Banmore. We have cars zooming. Nobody seems to drive too carefully. Coming down Banmore, often 4 to 5 stacked up to get onto Crooks in the morning traffic. We have cars turning around in our driveway at the same time as they miss the turn at Big Beaver, and the next best place to turn around is the Minsters. So we have Montessori School directly across from us, where often parents park along Banmore to unload their little children, and then again picking them up, also parking often on Banmore. We have a full-size school bus that sits there waiting to take the Montessori children on field trips occasionally, and then return them, all on Banmore. If that isn't enough commotion, add to the nights I'm mowing my lawn along the edge of Banmore and having to be so careful that the sun setting in the west is not binding or blinding those anxious drivers from running into me. We have walkers, dog walkers, we've got mothers with strollers, grandmothers with strollers, bikes, families walking to get ice cream up at the corner. Need I go on? It's a busy, busy area. Now add 70, 100 cars, I don't know. And if you think they're not going to cut through, I would. So, and I'm nice. So I believe the thing that gets to me most is this should never really have gotten this far. The fact that it did worries me, that the city's respect for its citizens are perhaps outweighed by the desire of developers. I don't expect the cows to cross Big Beaver or the horseback riders to reappear, but I do expect the Troy I knew to show itself again. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think the timer's working.
assuming I'm next. I was right behind her in line.
Barbara Davison, Troy resident?
Dawson, yes.
Dawson?
I'm Barbara Dawson.
Okay, I'm sorry. The W on my screen is not showing up, so.
Okay.
Good evening.
I live at 1834 Bolin, and I would just like to make a quick comment about the master plan was developed years ago, and the master plan is a guideline, it's a suggestion, it is not law. Since the master plan was developed, there's also been development going on in this neighborhood. Families who live on these R1 residential lots, and even I include in there also the PUD, these families have invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in their homes. Our neighborhood has $1 million homes in it. And they did this because the zoning ordinance says R1 residential, which is the law. The master plan is a guideline. And so this is a residential family neighborhood. I'd like you to keep that in mind when you consider rezoning. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'll call on Keith Park. Parquet, Troy resident.
Yes.
Good evening.
Hi, Keith Park. I'm at 1540 Bulan. I live in the home that my grandfather built back before the city of Troy was the city of Troy. And so I've seen many of the things that were just spoken about by our first speaker. Here we go again. You know, we're before you once again here. Same issues with the same developer. And the interesting thing is that in the past, he's brought ideas and concepts to us, and we knew what they were planning and what they were talking about. Right now, we don't seem to know what they're even going to be putting in place here, from what I gather from this particular meeting. That just scares the heck out of me. I don't understand why they can't come up with an idea that's not going to be compatible with our neighborhood. And so I just urge you, why are we changing this? We've been here before. Why? Please, don't allow this.
Thank you. Next, I'll call on Mahalan. I'm sorry, I'm gonna butcher this. Srikanth?
Yes.
Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Mahalingam Srikanth. I reside at 2057 Sachin Way. And like the previous gentleman said here, I'm against this recommendation. And I think last time around we knew what the development was going to be, and we all raised the concern with respect to public safety and welfare. And I think the 2011-2012 map also made a very objective decision in terms of providing a conditional rezoning. So without knowing what the future plan is going to be for this site, how can we even assess the very same concerns that we had when this proposal was brought in before? So I would please urge the Tri-Council to make sure that we don't go for this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'll call on Kirit Patel, Troy resident. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm one of the residents on Sachin Way, 1993 Sachin Way. I just wanted to let you know that I'm against the proposed changes. I have a small family, small kids, a family of 4 kids and my wife. July 4th, we had our neighbors from Sachin Way, McClure, and Alpine invited. You guys were invited too. Sorry for the invitation getting lost in the mail. But we have something like 60, 70 residents come in and join us. This is a residential neighborhood. My kids, after 7 o'clock, once the sun goes down a little bit, they're outside with their neighbors. 20 kids on the street. Putting an apartment building, which is more than likely what's going to come up there, is going to endanger the lives of a lot of small kids. There isn't sidewalks on McClure. There aren't sidewalks on Alpine. There are cars that drive too fast. And putting heavy density development there is going to cause accidents. I'd like to have you think about the kids that are there and not add to the problems that we already have. I would love for you to also ask the builder or inquire whether this is permitted or not. Could we have that map one more time? If someone could bring the map. It's been mentioned a few times that density would limit the development, and I'm just curious, there is a large parking area below the proposed site and one to the east. Would the development be increased or the density increased if they had an agreement with the two parking lots, both below and to the side? Because it's been mentioned several times that the density of this proposed site would be limited by the number of parking spots. But if they had parking agreements or a parking structure built to accommodate a heavier density, would they be able to put in 300 apartments, a 6-story building? I don't know. I'd like for you guys to find out for that reason, because my family's there. The families of a lot of my neighbors are there, and I'd like you to think about the safety of our kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Sandeep Savoni, Troy resident, wishes to speak. Good evening.
Hi, good evening. My name is Sandeep Savoni. I stay on McClure Drive, about 300 feet away from the proposed rezoning property. What I want to point out is that the master plan was fully adopted many years ago. It's been gone through light reviews, what we can call light reviews in the interim. But since the master plan was fully ratified, changes happened in the neighborhood. You have approved 16 single-family residences right next to this property within 50 feet of the proposed rezoning. This is something new that has happened. You have approved that. And you need to consider those houses now, which are Sachin Way, while making a decision of what to do. And that essentially is the intent of City Council review. When there are things that have changed, for example, and there are new situations, then there needs to be a review. It's just not a mathematical formula anymore or a simple stipulation. It needs a human review from the City Council to determine whether some of the fundamentals of the City of Troy are being met by this application. And it is your duty as City Council to first of all protect some of the fundamental things such as safety and welfare of citizens in the neighborhood. And on that criteria, you have the ultimate authority as per the city ordinance to make a decision of whether this proposed rezoning is going to have any negative impact on the health, safety, and welfare of people. So you should keep that in mind. Residents have said this again and again, that there is going to be a significant impact on the health, safety, welfare of people, availability of public services to this site, etc. So you need to take that into account as you make this decision. Also, since this same property with the same builder has gone through a conditional rezoning process earlier, it's clear that the builder has an intent to make a very heavy, high-density development in this particular area. And you need to keep that precedence in mind as you look for the safety and welfare of people in resolving this particular case where some change has happened, which is Sachin Way in the recent few years, and you need to make a decision whether now the new proposed rezoning will have an impact on the welfare of people in that area. Thank you.
Thank you. Rocky Wichkowski wishes to speak to. Good evening.
Evening, Mayor and Council. I could not say any better than my colleague and my neighbor Sandeep said. Quite frankly, we're here to talk about the health, safety, and welfare of the residents that live on McClure as well as on Alpine, because I don't wish to speak again and reiterate the same comments. We've talked about substandard road. Just so that you all know, this is not just a substandard road of 22 feet width. This is a 20-foot wide road, a super substandard road. So the easement from one side, from the east to the west, is 60 feet, 20 feet on each side of the properties, and then right in the center, the street is only 20 feet wide. And I will tell you, as a citizen that lives on McClure and has a 5-year-old daughter, I find it despicable that people speed and the traffic that comes through Crooks and up Big Beaver. This road cannot handle any more traffic. My personal post box has been now hit 4 times. 4 times. Imagine if that's your 5-year-old daughter. Imagine if that's your child. Lastly, I want to address some of the comments and the misstatements that Mr. Carson made. He talked about the previous developments that were in front of you, the 25-foot, 26-story development. Well, folks, that development was adjacent and on Big Beaver Road. If this development was on Big Beaver Road, we wouldn't have an issue. But this development is in a neighborhood. It's in the Muir Gardens neighborhood. And Satchin Road, the development right north of that, changed everything to this master plan. I moved in at the end of 2015. Most of my neighbors here that built new homes, including Satchin Way, have moved in 2016. This master plan was an error. And therefore, we are actually we're collecting an informal petition. If you want us to go formally, we'll go formally. But we're collecting informal petitions right now that we will give to the council at the next council meeting or the council meeting after that, requesting you to specifically pass a resolution to ask the Planning Commission to revisit the Muir Gardens and Satchin Way neighborhoods and take us out of the Big Beaver Farm District. Because, folks, it's no longer a Big Beaver Farm District when you build brand new homes. But again, I want to come back to the most important thing. Satchin Way changed everything. The PUD changed everything. Your obligation is to preserve the health, safety, and welfare and abide by the ordinances of the city. I ask you to vote this down because of the potential of health, safety, and welfare and the fact that this road has not been improved. Improve the road, then we can talk. But the road is an issue and there's health, safety, and welfare issues if you want to develop this into a commercial site instead of maintain it as an R1B residential. Thank you.
Thank you. Carolyn Nguyen? Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Carolyn Nguyen. I live at 2056 Satchin Way. I live on the north side of Satchin Way. I am the second house off the corner on the side of Alpine. So if a development were to go up either on that corner specifically, I would be staring right at it. I'd be one house away from it. I have 3 children with my husband. Our kids are ages 11, 9, and 7. They play outside with their neighborhood friends. As someone said earlier, we have about 20 plus kids that live on our street. We often bike up to Boland Park, going up Alpine on the summer nights to enjoy the park up there, and we bike back. I do worry doing that, but we're with our kids all the time. We have bike helmets. We make sure we stick to the side of the road. If there is an oncoming car, a car coming near us or towards us, they're always veering off to the side. There is not a lot of room on that street at all, and there are no sidewalks. So I worry, attracting more traffic into that area will be very dangerous for our kids. Also, if you guys remember in the fall, there was a bank robbery at Flagstar Bank, just within walking distance of our homes. That afternoon, there was a detective that came to our house and knocked on our door and asked us if we had a camera on the front of our home to get a picture of the license plate or the getaway vehicle, which was parked on Satchin Way. So I'm worried if we bring more intensity, more people to this area, a lot more people, we're going to attract more crime. That's just a part of it. And some people may say there's already a problem with retail. We don't want more problems in our neighborhood. The third point is, I'm worried about our property values. There is, on the east and west side of Satchin Way, there is no buffer. There's no buffer. There won't be a wall. There'll be a street. We'll be looking right at these 2 developments. And just to make a note, the residents that purchase on the south side of Satchin Way purchase at a much I wouldn't say much, but at a lesser price than the residents of the north side because they were facing a retail shopping mall. And so I just want to let you know that I'm worried that if you attract an apartment building to either side of us, our property values will drop, and that will mean you're taking money out of our pocket. So I really urge you to put yourself in our shoes and think about living on that street with your families and whether you would want a development like this at your, near your homes. So I urge you to vote no. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes those that have signed up to speak on this item this evening, but I will give anyone an opportunity, if they wish to speak on this item, to please come forward that didn't sign up. Please give us your name, please.
My name is Denise Phillips Walker. I live at 3381 McClure. And I first want to say thank you to the Planning Commission. I know they're not here, but we appreciate that they voted it down to begin with. We really do. I also want to say that I was at a meeting 2 weeks ago, and I was very proud of the way the City Council responded to the plan proposal. You talked about safety, you talked about traffic and concerns, and I guess I want to see the same thing given to us. I literally took notes. I went back and looked at the tape because I thought it was important. Thank you for being aware that these issues exist. We appreciate that. Traffic sucks. I went out this morning, at 10:30. Our house is on Banmore ends at our house on McClure. I cross the street, get 50 feet down, I hear tires squealing. There's a stop sign. Tires squealing. Someone shoots in my driveway, burns rubber, backs out, and I'm standing and staring at the guy. So he kind of comes around. He says, sorry. I said, there's a speed limit. You're going too fast. Cut it out. It is frightening. It's very frightening. And again, I'm for change. We adjusted when the big houses came into the neighborhood. We're happy. It's all good. They brought children. It is a good neighborhood. And we want it to continue to be a good neighborhood. We want it to be a safe neighborhood. So again, thank you to the Planning Commission for saying no. And we hope that you will be very mindful of what could come into our neighborhood and how it could affect us in a negative way. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the audience wish to speak on this item this evening? I'm going to close the public hearing and return it to the table for a resolution, but before we do that, we're going to take a break for 5 minutes. We'll be back in 5 minutes. Thank you. The city council meeting is now back in order. We're at a point of returning the resolution to the table. Does anyone on council wish to move a resolution? Mayor Pro Tem Baker.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move E1, Section A, resolution to deny as printed.
Support.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Baker and supported by Councilman Pennington to approve E1A, which is a resolution to deny the rezoning as printed in the agenda packet. Discussion on that item. Mayor Pro Tem Baker.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you all who came tonight and spoke and recognized a lot of faces from 2+ years ago, and seen you in your neighborhood, seen you at Planning Commission meetings as well. I'll start with the end here. I think that anything short of single-family residential on this parcel is going to be a detriment to the health, safety, and welfare of the neighboring properties and the residents in that area. And I just, when I look at what could happen, the idea of anything other than single-family residential will not be compatible with the surrounding properties. I do understand that there are parking lots and commercial development to the south and to the east, but that conveniently neglects to mention to the north and to the west it's single-family residential. So when I look at a 50-50 balance of, half of it's single-family residential, the other half is a parking lot, essentially. There's not actually businesses right up against that property. I believe you have to side with the less use, which is the single-family residential. With regard to the master plan, I think that many good comments were made. It's something that we've been dealing with for the past couple of years. 2016, it was renewed, but I do believe that potentially it was renewed with some problems, with an error. When Sashin Way was installed and residents moved in there, it dramatically changed that whole neighborhood. It really did. And if you look at it's not up there, but if you looked at the aerial picture as we have, you see a row of single-family residential on the south side of Sashin Way and on the north side. And that faces out to these three properties on McClure. You just can't deny that the whole concept of that area has changed dramatically with the inclusion of that street and those single-family houses. A comment that was made, I can't remember if it was by Mr. Carson or by Mr. Aventini, but reference was made to discouraging future investment in the city with a conditional rezoning process or this rezoning. I appreciate that comment, but I also don't believe it. If you look around our city, I don't think we're hurting for development. I think if you ask the residents, they'd tell you something completely different, actually. I think they'd say it's going too far the other way. So I think with the several conditional rezoning projects we've had, the cluster ordinance projects that we've had, there hasn't been a discouragement of business investment in this city. And I don't think us not rezoning this property per your application will discourage future business investment in our city. I've been on McClure on foot. I've been in a car. I haven't been on roller skates or a bike, but maybe I should. I think that it's a narrow road and traffic is a huge concern. We cannot discount that fact. Any development more than these single-family houses that are existing there as the zoning is going to result in an increase of traffic, is going to result in an increase or a decrease in safety for not only the neighbors that already live there, but whatever gets developed there. We can't be responsible for doing that. It would be a severe risk to the health, safety, and welfare of that neighborhood and neighboring properties. So for that reason, I move this motion to deny the rezoning request, and I will be voting in favor of denying it.
Thank you. Councilman Henderson.
So I can't disagree with the recommendation by the Planning Commission on a 5-3 vote or recommendation from city management that would recommend denying this. So, my vote will be no as well, or excuse me, yes on this particular item. But further to that, I don't disagree with the concept of more high-density residential housing along Big Beaver. I think that's what Big Beaver is all about anymore. And we need to try to figure out how to do that. And whether that's McClure, Alpine, whatever streets we try to make new or make different, we need to try to creatively figure out a way to do that. We need to, I think we need to revisit the master plan, and not just, I don't think rewriting the master plan is the idea, but we need to reset our minds with the planning commission and with our planning department, because we seem to always have these scenarios where this one here is not necessarily that scenario, but we always seem to have these scenarios where we get a recommendation and then this council turns down some sort of a project. In this particular situation, planning turned it down or recommended disapproval, so therefore I'm in favor of this denial. But with regard to discouraging investment, if we do this too often, it will absolutely discourage investment. And yes, we have great development going on, and I appreciate Mr. Staffa's the development he's done just in that neighborhood, the housing that he's put together, and I think Mr. Richkowski can attest to this. He does some really good projects. I think he's given that entire area a facelift, and has increased the values in that neighborhood significantly with some of the projects he's done. So again, if we discourage all sorts of development moving forward, you're going to absolutely get developers that are going to say, yeah, you know what, we don't want to do business in Troy. And it's not happening now. Thank goodness we have a lot of great stuff going on in the city, but we have to be better. We have to, and I mentioned this with the Sylvanwood project a couple weeks ago. We have to be better in the city of Troy at this whole development piece, whether it's revisiting the master plan, redoing the master plan, being better at communicating between the planning commission and neighbors and the city council and city management. We just have to do a better job at making that a better project at the end of the day. So again, I'll be voting against this as well on the recommendation of the planning commission and city management, but we have to be better people in the planning phase of things here.
Thank you. Councilwoman Abraham.
Thank you, Mayor. While in some ways it feels similar to the conversation that was held 2 years ago, that was a conditional rezone, and this is something very different. It's a rezoning request. So it sounds similar, but it's different, and the standards for approval or denial are different. So the first standard is proposed rezoning is consistent with the master plan. If the current zoning is in material conflict with the master plan, such conflict is due to one of the following items: a change in policy since the master plan was adopted, a change in conditions since the master plan was adopted, or an error in the master plan. And when the master plan was substantially revised in 2008, there was a notion that the Big Beaver district and the landmass within there would be a contiguous property and that there would be frontage and access off of Big Beaver Road. And since then, conditions have changed, and the proposal that's before us does not have access on Big Beaver Road, and it's not contiguous with the landmass to the south of it. And to me, I don't find it consistent with the master plan because I think there has been a change in condition. The second standard is the proposed rezoning will not cause nor increase any nonconformity, and I believe it would increase the nonconformity. We've seen a list of uses that could be possible. It could be a one-story building, it could be a three-story building, it could be a six-story building. All would be allowable within that zone. So right now we have a one-story building that's right on Big Beaver. We could have a three-story building according to the concept. That's something that's feasible. And then we'd have homes to the north of it back to 1 or 2 stories. So I find that to be a nonconformity and increasing the nonconformity. The third standard is public services and facilities are affected by a proposed development will be capable of accommodating service and facility loads caused by the use of development or of the development. I think there's been a few references to the narrowness of McClure Road. and the lack of sidewalks. Public services include roads, and if the roads are already problematic today, adding in what could potentially be a commercial enterprise there is going to increase traffic. It's going to cause a load and undue, maybe earlier premature wear on the roads and perhaps some of the facilities. The fourth standard is rezoning will not impact public health, safety, or welfare. Again, the roads are narrow, there is no sidewalk. In the winter, when the roads become more narrow with piles of snow, it becomes even more problematic, especially since there are schools in the area. I find that there is an impact to public health, safety, or welfare. And the fifth and last standard is the rezoning will ensure compatibility with adjacent uses of land. There are residential homes on 2 of the 4 sides. There was a reference to a parking lot to the east. What wasn't mentioned is that parking lot is for a business that has access off of Big Beaver Road. So I find that it is also not compatible with the adjacent land uses. So for that reason, I will be supporting the resolution to deny.
Thank you. Councilwoman Hoderick.
Ditto to what Councilwoman Abraham just said. I had the same, test that is in our ordinance and then the same basic comments. I'm very concerned about the safety issue on that narrow road and also the compatibility with the adjacent uses. We did just go through this, but this is a new decision, and I treated it as a new decision, and I want to assure the applicant that I did. I spent a lot of time watching and listening to planning, reading through what the city has brought to us, drove back into that neighborhood again just this weekend. I am blown away at that residential area. It is a gem of an area. These folks live in a beautiful, beautiful neighborhood. I've lived here close to 30 years. I'm very familiar, had my children play with friends there, and I've watched it evolve. And I think what's happened since 2016, the last time we reviewed the master plan, which we do every 5 years, there's been continued evolution of that neighborhood in a beautiful, beautiful way. And that has to be factored into our decision-making. I parked on Satchin Way, and it's probably on all cameras, on your Ring cameras, and kind of took a walk along. Don't look, because I was in shorts and it was hot, and really looked to say, okay, there's options of what could go here. On that list, even the least intense options, I don't see the compatibility if you live there on Satchin Way and have to look at that. Section 1.03B of our zoning ordinance describes one of its purposes, and that's to protect the character and stability of residential neighborhoods. And C, regulate the intensity and form of land development to ensure compatibility among land uses and, where applicable, provide transitions between land uses to reduce potential negative impacts. I truly tried to think through how would you reduce the negative impact. I am not anti-development. I've supported development. I support the density and soft density that's coming into Troy when it makes sense. Couldn't make this work. These areas are not on Big Beaver. They are on residential roads. They're tucked into a beautiful neighborhood, and rezoning them would, and the word I could come up with to describe it is it would bastardize that neighborhood. That may seem like a strong word to use, but when you look at the definition, to change something in such a way as to lower its quality or value, typically by adding new elements, I find it to be the perfect word. And if you lived in one of those residential homes there, or even on McClure or Alpine or in that neighborhood, that's what this would feel like our council did to the people who lived there. I can't do it. I can't, I would like to find a way to make it work and be able to say to the residents, let's work. I can't see it. It doesn't pass our test. And I want to make sure that while we're encouraging development, and I think we have a very great reputation of working with developers, we're also protecting our neighborhoods, and I will make no apology for that. That's our job. Thank you.
Councilman Hamilton?
Thank you. I don't have too much to add to what other council members have said. I don't think this is right for this location. I wasn't on council when this was voted on 2 years ago, so just in the interest of transparency, I've met both with residents on McClure that have showed me the area. This was last year. Mr. Stafford reached out to me last year to grab a cup of coffee, and he showed me a different project than this, so not this one, but just I've listened to people from both sides of this argument in the last year and a half, and I support the resolution to deny.
Thank you. Councilman Pennington?
Yeah, this is a no-brainer for me, not knowing what the petitioner would want. Well, to start with, this has never come to us before where it's been turned down by the Planning Commission and then it's a resolution to deny from city management. This is, I've only been doing this for 7 years up at City Council, but this has never come to us before. So it's a little strange to begin with. Mr. Carson did not announce himself and his attorney, but I'm taking for granted that you are one. It just seems to me like it would be a rezoning to make it easier to, maybe slip something in that would turn into similar to the storage unit on Rochester Road or the billboard signs on Rochester Road, to where it would be easier to get something by City Council. So just doesn't make any sense, and we're going to deny this one.
Thank you. My comments are going to be short. I just try to be very consistent when I look at projects and I look at the master plan and what the intent was back in 2016. And I watched the Planning Commission meeting, and I listen to staff, and I've talked to staff separately also. And the theme that I get consistently from them is that unless you can wrap your hands around what it's going to be, it's hard to approve something that you don't know for sure what is going to be there. And I go back to Amber Apartments that was changed from R1B to BB to allow the Amber Apartments, and I voted for that because it was a conditional, so we knew exactly what was going to go in there, and we knew exactly what was going to be done, and we pared that down even from the original plan. So I think the theme that I got from staff, the theme that I got from the Planning Commission was that rather than doing a rezoning, we need to know what it's going to be before we feel confident to wrap our hands around that. So that's what I need from me. So if there's no other comments, we'll call for the vote. Ms. Dixon?
Mayor Slater?
Yes.
Councilmember Abraham?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Councilmember Pennington?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you for those that came this evening to speak on that public hearing. And I see that most of the same people want to speak on the next public hearing. So once again, I'll ask Brent Savanagh, Community Development Director, to come forward. I know this is going to be much shorter. City Attorney Bloom?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Mayor, I know that there is a lot of duplication. Obviously, there are unique points I'm sure that Mr. Savanagh wants to point out, and also Mr. Carson may wish to point out as well. But Mayor, maybe at this point in time, it might be appropriate for you to pass a resolution that would incorporate all of the statements, including the City Council statements, and also the statements of the presenters that have been made as part of the public hearing record for this particular item as well.
Do we have to waive the rules for that?
Add a resolution, you would waive the rules, yes.
I'll move to waive the rules, and I think we just need consent for that, correct? You want us to vote on that?
To add an item, I'd feel more comfortable if you voted on it.
I will move to waive the rules and add an item. Moved by the chair and supported by Mayor Pro Tem Baker that we waive the rules to add an item to the agenda. Any discussion? The vote, Ms. Dixon.
Councilmember Abraham?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Councilmember Pennington?
Yes.
Mayor Slater?
Yes, motion passes. I'll move the resolution to incorporate the statements from the first public hearing, statements from staff, from the petitioner, from residents, and city council to be incorporated in E2.
Support.
Moved by the chair and supported by Mayor Pro Tem Baker that we incorporate what I just indicated into E2, along with City Attorney Bloom's statements and recommendations. Any discussion on that? The vote, Ms. Dixon.
Mayor Pro Tem Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Councilmember Pennington?
Yes.
Mayor Slater?
Yes.
Councilmember Abraham?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Thank you, City Attorney. Okay, Brent Savedant, you're going to keep this a little shorter.
Absolutely.
Community. Okay. Thank you.
I'd like to clarify one thing that was stated during the discussion of the previous item, because it also applies to this item. There was a resolution to deny and a resolution to approve. We provided both. What was confusing, probably, Councilmember Pennington, was the fact that we put denial first, because that was consistent with what was the recommendation by the Planning Commission, was to deny. So a little confusing, somewhat different. So I can see why you'd think there's only one resolution, but there were two. So
understood.
So the subject parcel in this instance is 2 residential lots totaling 1.66 acres. It's the same rezoning from R1B to Big Beaver. And again, the applicant has not volunteered any conditions. Zoning to the north and to the east is single-family residential. Or excuse me, land use to the east, north and to the east is a single-family residential. To the south is a restaurant and a parking lot, and to the west is a detention and a large office building. Here you see the rezoning. West and south is Big Beaver, to the east is PUD, and to the north, single-family residential. This is the concept plan that was required by the application. Because the site's smaller, it's less intensity. On the sketch, 3-story mixed-use building, again, non-binding. I've talked enough about these uses, and I read the statement that was in the application that was provided by the applicant. We talked about the master plan, what it proposes, and the transition of intensity based on the building height plan, what the goals were. We've already discussed, and some of the residents brought up, what's been constructed along Big Beaver, 1-story buildings. And I talked at length about the depth that's in the master plan as compared to the depth that's in the zoning district. Because how am I going, Mr. Mayor?
You couldn't do better.
The master plan summary is exactly the same as I read previously, and the rezoning findings are the same as applied to this site. So again, we believe the rezoning standards have not been met. Remind you the Planning Commission resolution to deny 5-3 on May 28th, and City Management recommends denial of the rezoning. And furthermore, there was not a protest petition submitted for this application, so approval would require a simple majority of 4 votes.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you, Brent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want you to know that I feel good about having at least one of my proposals adopted tonight, which was the incorporation by reference. So I didn't leave empty-handed, and I think that's at least one positive. With respect to Alpine, I think that much of what I said before is applicable to this. That's why it's incorporated by reference. I would like to stress again a couple things, one of which is all of the uses that have been put up and the horror stories that are stated with respect to what those uses could be are not applicable to this situation. There's a specific chart which I've referred everybody to. You can take a look at it at your leisure or next week or whatever you want, and you'll find out that many of those uses are not allowed. You'll also find out sooner or later that under form-based zoning, compatibility is assured and that the transition does happen. There is a transition that can benefit this neighborhood. And it is not a horror story to say that compliance with the form-based zoning will bring a negative impact. It will screen, it will provide the transition, which is in the invitation that the city has provided, and in this site, which is substantially, relatively speaking, one is, I think, 2.66 acres, that was McAlpine, and I think that this one is about 1.55 acres. So its potential use is even more restricted by the form-based zoning, which is applicable to this site, and the site is peculiar to it. The house immediately to the north, I think everybody's familiar with it, with the airplane hangar garage, whatever it turns out to be that's sitting on that property, I think everybody knows about that. And with respect to the property immediately to the west, be it detention or future commercial use, what have you, all of that will end up being screened, as will the visibility across Big Beaver. I think other than that, having incorporated, I look forward to your vote. Maybe somebody will change their mind, and if not, I still appreciate the courtesy of being able to speak before you tonight, and thank you.
Thank you. Looks like similar residents have signed up to speak on this item. First, I'll call on, let me open the public hearing first and ask if Keith Park still wishes to speak on this item.
I think I don't want to repeat myself. One thing I would ask is...
Your comments have been incorporated into this also.
Very good. We did have a beautiful forest on that property. Of course, the owner can do what he wishes, and he cut that forest down. But that was several months ago, and right now I'm seeing a lot of weeds and things coming up on that property. So I just hope that it can be maintained and kept in the character of the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Mahalam Shrikath.
The one thing I would like to add with respect to the previous comments is we are within a mile of Bemis and Bolden Middle School, so all our kids don't get a school bus, so they have to walk on Alpine in order to get to the middle school and the elementary. The road is a pretty narrow road, and so I do share all the concerns that I shared before in terms of public health, safety, and welfare. And so I would like to take that into consideration as well. So that's primarily what I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Kirit Patel.
Thank you. I live on 193 Sachin Way. The same concerns I had earlier. I just add that my daughter does ride her bike to Bolin. It is a narrow street, as others have mentioned. It is dangerous. At some point in the next 2 years, my son will also be there riding his bike. Traffic is a concern. We don't know what's going to be there. And someone mentioned that the existing trees were cut down. We have a mosquito problem now. I didn't have that problem last year. This year we have. There's a lot of standing water. So I don't think we should take kindly to what happened to that forest that was there. Thank you.
Thank you. Rocky Richkowski.
I'll be very brief. I know my name was brought up by one of the councilmen about the condition of my home. I have major issues with my home and with the builder, but that's my personal issue and my personal opinion, and not to be brought up in front of the council. But I will share this, that one of the council members mentioned that we need to know exactly what will go there. We may not need to know exactly what will go there. What we need to know is how it will affect the health, safety, and welfare. Let's plant our flag on that issue. Let's talk about that specific issue and the fact that this is a substandard road. Alpine is just like McClure. It's 20 feet wide. So it's a substandard road. Unless you're willing to expand that road, we shouldn't be considering any issue regarding what will go in those locations. R1B still fits that area. It doesn't make it dense and supports the health, safety, and welfare. So I would continue to implore the council to stick on health, safety, and welfare. Thank you.
Thank you. Carolyn Guyen. Does anyone else wish to speak on this item this evening? That concludes those that have signed up. Please give us your name, please.
Rudra Mupuri. Good evening to everybody. I live next to the proposed project. I live in 2073 Sachin Way. As all my neighborhood mentioned the safety concerns, I have more safety concerns than anybody else in that area, of course. But at the same time, when I requested a year and a half ago regarding the fence, I want to put a 6 feet fence all around the house. But the city said no, because it's a safety. You can build 6 feet only up to your house. Rest of the fort has only allowed 4 feet with fenestrated, so that the traffic can able to see what is coming there, so we can avoid accidents or any injuries. So if that is come to the point when city is concerned that safety building things, how is going to allow a high-rising building and come to the public safety and neighborhood safety issue? One. Number two, 2017, late 2017, ADV restaurant built next to where they're proposing the site. If that is the case, the city have right to build a high-rising building there itself. You can deny, we're not going to allow single rising building here. You need to build multiple story building next to the Big Beaver. It is not next to the Big Beaver where they are building. It is close to the neighborhood. And safety and security, I request to deny this proposal, allow them as a single family resident, living neighborhood, preserve the safety of the city residents, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak this evening? Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Vijay Patel. I live on Alpine, a little bit further north up. One of the comments I wanted to make, but again, related to health and safety, is even though nothing has been built there yet, and we've seen some traffic shifts because of the construction on I-75, we've already seen a ton of traffic starting to come through the neighborhood. And that's only because of stuff that's going on further away from where we are right now. And if you were to add another additional 50, 100 cars to that neighborhood, it's going to be a serious problem. As it is, we're already seeing cars flying through the neighborhood. I go to work relatively early because I work in Detroit. I leave around 6 o'clock in the morning, and I still have to be very careful coming out of my driveway because people are flying down that street. So I think there'd be a major issue if there was additional cars added there. And I've got 3 young kids, and there's a very strong community that's being developed there now. We're very tight. We all hang out together, and it worries me seeing the cars traveling that fast when all the kids are playing outside. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak on this item this evening?
Good night, everyone. My name is Andrea Hernandez Troya. I live at McClure Drive, 3183. And I just want to say that we are very, very concerned about the safety, especially of our children. We are driving our bikes, we're walking to school. During the snow season, there's really not even a space for two cars there. Like, you have to really stop and wait for the other car to go. So we are very worried about what could happen if you authorize this to be considered as Big Beaver. Big Beaver has two huge streets, there's sidewalks, and there's a big difference between Alpine, McClure, and Big Beaver. So please, we're hoping and really counting on you guys to say no to this proposal. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak this evening? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and return it to the table for resolution. Mayor Pro Tem Baker.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to move E2 rezoning application file number ZJPLN 2019-0010, proposed Big Beaver rezoning west side of Alpine, north of Big Beaver Road, Sidwell number 88-20-401-020, section 20 from R1B, one family residential, to BB, Big Beaver zoning district, site type C, street type C, subsection A, resolution to deny as printed.
Support. Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Baker and supported by Councilman Hamilton that we approve E2, the rezoning application file number ZJPLN 2019-0010 as printed in the agenda packet with section A, the resolution to deny. Anyone wish to comment other than what's been incorporated into Councilman Henderson?
Yet, again, all comments stand as we've mentioned, but I just want to clarify, it wasn't a disparaging comment with regard to the home specific that was mentioned, but it was a commentary on the entire neighborhood. That neighborhood's been around for a long, long time, and I know a lot of the houses, I know a lot of realtors that have sold homes in that area, and they're high quality, they're good homes, they command a high price, and the high tide rises all ships in the neighborhood. That was the reason for that commentary, so just to clarify.
Mayor Pro Tem Baker.
Thanks, Mayor. Obviously won't be repeating my comments from earlier, but I did want to clarify one thing. My position on both of these proposals is that any rezoning outside of single-family residential in this case would affect the public health, safety, and welfare and had nothing to do with whether or not there was any conditional rezoning or any other project presented before us. I'm looking at this strictly as the rezoning by itself, and my opinion is that any rezoning which takes it outside of single-family residential would impact the public health, safety, and welfare of the residents and neighboring properties. So it's not about the fact that I couldn't see what was being proposed there at all. It's the public health, safety, and welfare. Thank you.
Any other comments from council? The vote, Ms. Dixon.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Councilmember Pennington?
Yes.
Mayor Slater?
Yes.
Councilmember Abraham?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baker?
Yes.
Motion passes. We're going to take another 5-minute break and allow those that are here for this item to exit at their convenience. We'll be back in 5 minutes. Thank you. Meeting is now back in order. Next on the agenda is public comment for items on the agenda from Troy residents and businesses, and I'll call on David Ashland. Troy resident wishes to speak on P2C. I don't see him right now, so I'll call on Aaron Green, Troy resident who wishes to speak on I-5 and P2C. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor. Some of this may be new to you. I don't know if you watched the previous special meeting on Wednesday at a later point. Good evening, Council. This is going to be, to some degree, more of the same. I wanted to clarify some of my statements, especially, and augment them, having seen the full and final report. The depth of what was made clear in the report by Plant Moran and the firmness with which they made clear that what was the foundation of their report was the Lang report, was not necessarily from what they worked as a baseline, but what they confirmed very thoroughly, and which they then used as a structure upon which to base a lot of what they brought forward and their recommendations and their results. And what they made clear is that this was known by not necessarily every single member of council, but by basically everybody. There was a culture of complicity. There were many people that knew that there were violations by Brian Kishnick, and they were complicit due to the tone brought by council. And I know that that was not a unanimous decision when the Lang report came up and choices were made. And that does not excuse everything, but recognizing that there were people saying, both on council and off, that there were problems and they were not being addressed, and that then they weren't addressed, or that the addressing was done in a sort of cursory manner and then not followed up on, and that resulted in worse transgressions being allowed and condoned, tacitly or explicitly, really shows that there is a need to fix the problems. And you may not like it, but since you are the only person on council who at our last meeting refused to admit or acknowledge that you did not make a mistake, Councilman Henderson, I do not think that you are fit to hold this office.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Thank you. That concludes those that have signed up to speak on public comment. It's an opportunity for administration response or city council response. Anything this evening? Seeing none, there are no postponed items this evening, so we move to regular business. I-1A, there are no mayoral appointments, no city council appointments this evening. I-2A, there are no mayoral nominations. Any city council nominations?
Yes.
I will defer to Mayor Pro Tem Baker for city council nominations.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move the nomination of Robin Belcher-Meany and Shirley Canoza to the Charter Revision Committee for the terms expiring April 30th, 2022.
Support.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Baker and supported by Councilwoman Abraham that we appoint those that were indicated on the record by Mayor Pro Tem Baker to those positions. Any discussion on the nominations? The vote, Ms. Dixon.
Councilmember Henderson?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Councilmember Pennington?
Yes.
Mayor Slater?
Yes.
Councilmember Abraham?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Motion passes. Is that it? Thank you. Next in the agenda is I3. There is a request for closed session this evening. Mayor Pro Tem Baker.
I'd like to move I3, request for closed session. Be it resolved that Troy City Council shall meet in closed session as permitted by MCL 15.268E, pending litigation, Ryan Wolf v. City of Troy.
Support.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Baker and supported by Councilman Hamilton that we approve I3, which is a request for closed session as printed in the agenda packet. Discussion? The vote, Ms. Dixon.
Mayor.
I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand there.
Okay.
My head's wrong.
Councilwoman Abraham.
My question for the city attorney is, if there is something actionable that comes out of closed session, would that appear on the next city council agenda?
Mayor, yes.
City Attorney Bloom.
The closed session, no action can be taken in a closed session, so if there is any action to be taken, it would necessarily come back to the next city council meeting, which will be in August.
May I follow up? The reason I'm asking this question is when you refer to the second quarter litigation report that summarizes the case, there are some accusations and allegations there that are troubling, and I would prefer to see action, if there's any actionable items that come out of closed session, to come back to the table sooner rather than later. So my question is it possible to waive the rules and come back into open session after the closed session tonight?
Your question was, is it possible? Yes, we have done that before. Normally, before doing that, though, we make it very clear that that is what will be occurring. So the answer to your question is, can you waive the rules? Yes. I don't have a resolution prepared to do that. I'm sure that the clerk and I can probably come up with something if that is the desire of council to come back into open session. Also, normally we would like to have it included in the agenda packet so that it's very clear that there would be action taken at the meeting.
And this isn't anything that I've ever inquired about, certainly nothing that I've ever asked for. I think in the context of the last few days with the Plant Moran report, I'm looking for as much transparency and as much expedition as possible. So while it is quite unusual and quite frankly not something I ever conceived of doing before, I think I want to waive the rules and ask council to come back into open session afterwards. And if council doesn't support that, I'm fine with it, but I wanted to put that out there.
Is that a resolution on the table?
It's, I think I need to waive the rules first.
You have a motion on the floor right now to approve the closed session, so it would be more proper to act on that first, and then if you wanted to do something about waiving the rules to come back into closed session, you would do that after the vote to go into closed session at all.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Ready for the vote?
I am.
Thank you. The vote, Ms. Dixon.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Councilmember Pennington?
Yes.
Mayor Slater?
Yes.
Councilmember Abraham?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson?
Yes.
Motion passes. Councilwoman Abraham.
All right, so clearly I'm not used to waiving the rules, so is the motion to waive the rules so that we can come back into closed session? Or come back into open session after the closed session?
It would be similar to the one we did previously, where you would waive the rules to add a resolution after the closed session to do whatever it is that you'd like to do during that resolution.
All right. Then I'd like to resolve to waive the rules so that we may come back into open session after the closed session.
Support.
Moved by Councilwoman Abraham and supported by Councilman Hamilton that we waive the rules and come back into closed session or come back to the city council meeting after the closed session. Are we waiving the rules first?
Right, so you're waiving the rules so that you can add an item to the end of the agenda, essentially. That's what you're doing.
Vote on waiving the rules.
Councilmember Pennington?
Yes.
Mayor Slater?
Yes.
Councilmember Abraham?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
That motion passes. Councilwoman Abraham?
I'd like to resolve that we add a resolution after to reconvene in open session after agenda item S1 closed session and prior to adjournment. And act upon anything that might be acted upon if we come to consensus in closed session.
Support.
Moved by Councilwoman Abraham and supported by Council Hamilton that we come back into session after closed session if there's consensus from...
Yeah, I kind of have it to add a resolution to convene into open session and act upon any consensus reached in the closed session. Does that sound right?
Okay.
Is that what?
Discussion on that motion. Councilman Henderson.
So, in the past, sometimes in this, to the city attorney, we've gone into closed session and come out with no action with action. So what, could we add the language if necessary, or is that appropriate?
Actually, I think that you really want to convey to, I mean, people may be waiting for you to come back in. So I think at a minimum that you can come back in and say, we're just to adjourn the meeting. So I think that that's absolutely appropriate. You don't have to take any action, but you should, if you do pass this, in order to be very clear, you should come back into open session. And again, maybe all that you do is just adjourn the meeting.
I don't have any issue with that. It's, I guess, something that we can discuss in closed session also, but I always feel that it's better to get something from the city attorney when that's written in a document that, you know, we can all see before we come back in. So this is very unusual to do something like this. I'm concerned, are we doing this because the TV cameras are here? No. Okay.
And Mayor, if I may,
sure.
You know, it may be that the consensus is not to act or to not act.
Correct.
Or to come back again at another time. There is
just
no...
your desire to try and get rid of this tonight rather than delay it for 2 weeks?
I think in light of all the controversy that's been going on and mistrust that's been in the community that's heightened over the past week, I would just as soon move expeditiously if we can. And if that means that if we consent on something tonight, I'd rather act on it tonight than wait 2 weeks to vote on it. I'd rather vote on it tonight. And it may be that we don't come to consensus or we need more information. And that's okay. Then we'll just come in and gavel out.
Okay. Any other discussion on this? The vote, Ms. Dixon?
Mayor Slater?
I'm going to say yes.
Councilmember Abraham?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Councilmember Pennington?
Yes.
Motion passes. I-4 is the Community Partnership Program between SMART and the City of Troy for Troy RYDE Service and Municipal Credit and Community Credit Agreement for 2020. And I see Kurt Bovenseep, our Public Works Director, is ready to introduce this.
Ready. Just a short presentation, Council and Mayor. If you remember, during the 2020 budget session or budget preparation, we agreed that we were going to include the assumption of the Medigo service, the service that provides transportation to seniors and persons with disabilities to appointments and places of interest. We also thought this would be a good opportunity, since Medigo Plus is a registered nonprofit group, that this would be a good opportunity to rebrand the service, to announce that the City of Troy is assuming the responsibility. Through our marketing efforts, we decided that Troy RIDE, which is an acronym standing for Reach Your Destination Easily, would be most appropriate and get the attention of our constituents that this service is available to them. Tonight you have a proposed resolution before you that includes the partnership with SMART that leases the buses and allows us to provide the service to the constituents, and also the associated revenue, which traditionally we were passed directly to Medigo. Through the City of Troy, we would give that money to Medigo. So both agreements, the first agreement, which is leasing the buses from SMART, which is very similar to the Big Beaver shuttle service that we provided, that agreement is very similar, where we are maintaining the buses. We also have negotiated with SMART. We did receive the 3 new shuttle buses with the Big Beaver shuttle service, and we negotiated with SMART to be able to keep those buses and the 3 newest buses that Medigo was also issued back in 2016. So good news is we're getting some updated shuttle buses for this service, and an additional van in the event that one of those buses have to go down for service. As I mentioned, the revenue from SMART includes the municipal and community credits, which totals just over $200,000, which will help offset the general fund costs for this service. We are currently have posted the transportation operations manager position open to the public right now. That does close August 5th. We're hopeful to get good candidates, and we can help really take this service off and make sure that we're providing the best service available to our constituents. Our anticipated launch for the service is October 1st. That coincides with the SMART's fiscal year, which ends September 30th, so we thought that would be a good opportunity to assume the responsibility. It's clean. We've talked to Medigo. They are cash sufficient to maintain the service until the end of September. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from Mayor Pro Tem Baker?
Thanks, Mayor. Hi, Kurt. Thank you. Are we prohibited from using the name Medigo? Is that why we're making the change, or is it just a rebranding? And my concern is, will we obviously do sufficient notice to the residents so they know that Medigo still exists but in a different form, more or less?
I'm not sure that we're prohibited from using it. We thought this was a good opportunity to rebrand the service. Medigo has been great to work with through this transition, and they've agreed to post the information. We're hopeful to be able to keep the same phone number, and with our IT, even possibly redirect using the website and redirect to the new website. So we have a lot of options to make the transition the easiest to our senior community.
Because that would be my concern, that here we're doing something that we're repurposing Big Beaver shuttle funds to increase the Medigo or Troy RIDE services to our population, and to have them have a different phone number, a call and think it's gone out of business or something terrible. I would really hate to see that happen. So I'm assuming, I know we'll do a heavy marketing to make sure it's properly notified, everyone's properly notified, but I just want to make sure that we're doing everything we can, basically, because it's a big investment for the city and a big benefit for our residents. So I just want to make sure they get the best bargain for it.
Yes.
Any other questions for Kurt? Thank you, Kurt. Somebody like to move the resolution? Councilwoman Abraham.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll move I-4 Community Partnership Program between SMART and the City of Troy for Troy RYDE, RIDE Service and Municipal Credit and Community Credit Agreement for 2020.
Support.
Moved by Councilwoman Abraham and supported by Mayor Pro Tem Baker, that we approve I-4 as printed in the agenda packet this evening. Any further discussion? The vote, Ms. Dixon.
Councilmember Abraham?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Councilmember Pennington?
Yes.
Mayor Slater?
Yes, motion passes. Thank you, Kurt and staff. Mr. Miller, thank you. I-5 is the proposed severance agreement. City Attorney Bloom.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and I don't have much to add to what's included in the agenda packet, but I just would mention that recruitment is also a consideration that is not necessarily in the memo, but certainly was a consideration in making this presentation to you.
Thank you. Any questions from council regarding the item? Somebody like to move that resolution? I will move the resolution to get it on the table. I-5, the proposed severance agreement, is printed in the agenda packet this evening.
Support.
Moved by the chair and supported by Councilman Henderson that we approve I-5, the proposed severance agreement as printed in the agenda packet this evening. Any discussion on that? The vote, Ms. Dixon?
Mayor Pro Tem Baker?
No.
Councilmember Hamilton?
No.
Councilmember Henderson?
Can we ask questions at this stage? Or is that passed?
It's up to the chair.
I don't see any reason why we shouldn't ask questions if we need to at any time. So, please.
This is for Attorney Bloom. Attorney Bloom, should we not pass this, what is the likelihood of a lawsuit?
It's possible, it is possible, and that's one of the factors that was considered in making this proposal and in entering into it and having the agreement drafted. So it is a possibility.
Okay, and
I have a question. This is a recommendation from City Attorney and City Manager, correct?
Yes and yes.
Yes and yes, okay. Councilman Pennington?
How much discussion can we have on this without getting in the deep end of the pool here?
I would urge caution in having a lot of discussion because this is something that, it covers only up to this point in time. It does not cover what the statements that are made at the meeting. So, I do urge caution.
I'm curious how much discussion took place to get 2 quick no votes on a no-brainer. So that's my question, but probably unanswerable.
Your vote, Councilman Henderson?
My vote is yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
No.
Councilmember Pennington?
Well, it's obvious to me that people had talked.
Point of order, is there comments allowed during voting?
We'll allow it.
I'd like to make a comment.
Well, then I'd like to make a comment after.
The vote, Councilman Pennington?
If it's recommended by City Manager and City Attorney, I will vote yes.
Mayor Slater?
Yes.
Councilmember Abraham?
No.
Motion fails. Next on the agenda is, we'll have council comments. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda, J1A. Does anyone wish to pull in a council agenda item this evening? Councilman Pennington? Or, I'm sorry, Councilman Henderson.
I'd like to move all items on the consent agenda as printed.
Support.
Moved by Councilman Henderson and supported, was that Councilman Pennington? Mayor Pro Tem Baker, you?
It's both of us.
that we approve all items on the consent agenda as printed. Any discussion? The vote, Ms. Dixon.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Councilmember Pennington?
Yes.
Mayor Slater?
Yes.
Councilmember Abraham?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baker?
Yes.
Motion passes. If you were here on a consent agenda item this evening, they've all been approved.
Mayor? I have
Trying to get my screens frozen here. So.
my screen jumped to an old agenda. My agenda changed without,
And mine froze, so.
could we have a,
We'll take a 5-minute recess and we'll come back after we figure this out. I was just going to go to paper, that's all.
Mine's okay.
City Council meeting is now back in order. Time for a new computer. Next on the agenda are memorandums and future council agenda items. There are none posted this evening, so we will move to public comment for items not on the agenda from Troy residents and businesses. And I'll call on Mr. Savage, who wishes to speak on this item.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. I guess I was tempted to go home, but having waited this long, the July 8th council meeting was almost entirely taken up with an application to rezone a parcel on Rochester Road. Not one Troy resident was in favor, and not one council member was in favor. So who was in favor? And how did it get this far? Let me explain. We'll hide this project so deep in the weeds, the mayor and council will never find it. You've heard those words before. They were from former city manager John Zerlag. The past 20, 25 years, Troy has more than its share of contentious, divisive issues. The convention center, 80% of the electorate voted against it. The sports stadium, the McClure Apartments, the storage units, the billboard signs, and of course, the Civic Center project, all unpopular, divisive issues that tore this city apart, tore our community apart. As I recall, none of these projects were initiated by a resident or by a council member. They were initiated and pushed by management, sometimes hidden from the council in the consent agenda. While John Zerlag was manager, it was one contentious issue after another. And before John Zerlag, City Manager James Bacon proposed a development that was shut down by the residents when they found out what was going on, because they didn't know. All this indicates that the management is out of touch with the residents and sometimes out of touch with the council. Keep in mind that all these projects, we survived without them. They were basically turned down by the people, by the residents, and we survived, and we're still going. We didn't need these projects. I do not believe that the Civic Center project was the brainchild of Manager Kishnick. In fact, I have a very uncomfortable suspicion that John Zerlag was somehow involved and maybe is still involved. I find it hard to believe that Mr. Kishnick was alone in all the dealings of the city politics of the last 3 or 4 years.
Thank you, Mr. Savage. Thank you.
Okay, I've got more to say, but we survived.
Thank you, sir.
And hopefully we'll be a stronger community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'll call on Avis Landmaster. Sorry I missed you. I don't have my screen. Good evening.
What I have to say seems so minor compared to some things I've heard tonight. But my comments are about the Sylvanwood Court 10-unit proposal development that you talked about in your July 8th meeting. I somehow missed that meeting. I don't know how I did until I saw it in the paper. I thought, my God, I missed a really interesting meeting, and I was sorry. On November the 27th of 18th, the Planning Commission voted 6-2 to forward the proposal to City Council for your consideration. And on that 7-8 meeting, after much discussion and explaining the rationale for each council member, you unanimously rejected it. What a stunning turn of events. There appears to be a disconnect between the two city entities, the Planning Commission and the council. And I agree with Councilman Baker. The Planning Commission and City Council need to once again jointly review and fine-tune the master plan, because it seems to be out of step with the residents in neighborhoods where these proposed projects hope to be located. Developers should be discouraged from spending money on unrealistic plans that ultimately stand a good chance of being rejected at the council level. Unhappily, the developer and the Planning Commission devoted a good deal of time and money to this proposal, seemingly all for naught. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes those that have signed up to speak on this item. Any response from Councilor and City Administration? There are no council referrals this evening. Any council comments this evening? Mayor Pro Tem Baker.
Thanks, Mayor. First, I'll start with the 25th Annual Food Fight to Tackle Childhood Hunger at 4 convenient locations. You can make a difference for a hungry child this summer. Gleaners Community Food Bank of Southeastern Michigan invites you to participate in the 25th Annual Hunger-Free Summer Food Fight to Tackle Childhood Hunger from July 15th through July 29th. We're in the middle of it now. The food fight is a contest to collect food and dollars to help feed hungry children. Area businesses, organizations, and individuals are encouraged to donate to this food drive program that benefits Gleaners Community Food Bank of Southeastern Michigan. Gleaners distributes to more than 400 agencies to help area families in need. Let's help feed the hungry children in our community. The top 5 food items needed are peanut butter, oatmeal and cereal, tuna fish, canned vegetables, and canned fruit. When school lets out for the summer, nearly 300,000 children in our community lose access to school-provided meals. The Hunger-Free Summer Food Fight is an annual food and fun drive collection in which organizations throughout southeastern Michigan compete to raise the most meals. Right now there's food collection bins at Troy City Hall, at both the east and west entrances, the Troy Public Library, the Troy Community Center south and east doors, and the Public Works Department on Rochester Road. To go back to I-5, I'll be brief. I chose not to make a comment before my vote because I was listening to our city attorney's advice not to make comments regarding the content of I-5, which is why I made my vote. To have 2 council members up here accuse any of us of something untoward or of any kind of potential violation of something is unbecoming and unnecessary, especially in light of the fact that there are plenty of times when there's been orchestrated lines of attacks against us, against me personally, prepared remarks that look like they're being read for the very first time from the table, and none of us make accusations and flippantly throw out comments in the middle of a vote. So I understand it may have surprised somebody that I voted no on that item, but to have 2 people make reference that maybe I did something wrong is actually, it flies in the face of previous comments they've made about maybe reached out to that person first privately before you make public comments. It seems a little bit hypocritical. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak now. I stand by my no vote on I-5, and for reasons stated by the city attorney, I will not be publicly stating why. I don't think that's appropriate in light of the circumstances, especially now.
Any other council comments? Councilwoman Abraham.
Thank you, Mayor. I do want to make reference to a flyer that I received and an email I received from a young Troy resident, one who makes a very positive and impactful change in our community. So there is a Kids to Kids fundraiser, a kite festival on August 4th, 1 to 5 in Bolin Park. It's a great family event. Our contact for it is Shruti Sunil Kumar, and if you want to pre-register for the event, it's $7 per person. If you want to register on site, it's $10 per person, and if you want more information on the Kids to Kids event, you can email kids to the number, kids, INMI@gmail.com, and you can get some additional potentially coupons for donors. All the proceeds from this event will be donated to the Foster Closet of Oakland County. There's also a contact phone number for those that might have questions about the event. It's 586-212-4340. And as I understand it, Shruti is a Troy High student, and every year for her birthday, I believe this is for her birthday, does a charitable event. And I think that's wonderful, and it's a testament to the strength of our community. So again, it's the Kite Festival, August 4th, 1 to 5 p.m. in Bolin Park. And you can register at https://kids, the number 2, kidsmi.weebly.com. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other council comments? I don't see that anyone has signed up for comments on items on or not on the agenda from members of the public outside of Troy.
Did we do reports?
I'm sorry?
Am I skipping ahead? No, keep going.
Okay. Anyone wish to speak on the reports this evening? Councilwoman Hoderick.
It's getting late, sorry. On the P2C, the Plant Moran report, I wanted to thank City Manager Miller for the introductory pages to that on your action report, and would like to point residents to that so that they can see the actions that have been taken already and the work that he's been doing. In the Plant Moran document, on pages 22 and 24, the abbreviation PD is used. And in municipal terms, particularly here in this city hall, that typically means police department to someone glancing at the document. But I believe in this case, the initials PD are referring to the purchasing director. As I recall from the Lang report, it was the purchasing director who had had her advice and memos overridden and edited. They weren't from the police department. I know this is not our product, and I want to be clear that we would not be editing a document done by an outside entity that was an evaluation of us, but I'm wondering if we could ask that be clarified clearly. Finance director is spelled out, it's not FD, the purchasing director, to just be consistent in the document for clarity. If maybe we could reach out to Plant Moran and ask them if they'd be willing to make those minor edits and get us a fresh document, I would be appreciative of that. And I suppose that we need, maybe, Mayor, we need consensus for that. I don't mean to direct, but I'm hoping we could have that clarity.
As long as it doesn't cost us any extra money.
Mayor, I don't know. I mean, certainly we could make a disclaimer on our city webpage, because that's probably where most people will be getting it. Certainly we can have a clarification. Again, I am reluctant. It is their product, and we could ask them for it, but I'm guessing that they wouldn't charge us extra money, but then I think there may also be some confusion with different versions out there as well.
Councilman Anderson.
I recall asking him in that meeting Wednesday night to do that, and they didn't produce that, or where are we at with that?
I can ask them if there is a consensus, but you will have different versions that are available. I think it's also probably a good idea to put it on our webpage for those reports that are already released.
I would be in favor of just putting a disclaimer of our own rather than changing the document itself. Just indicating what PD stands for in that particular document. Is there consensus for that? Okay. Thank you.
And then also just related to that, one of the comments in it that just really spoke to me, and I wanted to highlight it, one of the best defenses against business failure and an important driver of business performance is a strong internal control environment. In addition, establishing proper process is only part of the equation. In that, it is necessary that the employees responsible for overseeing, implementing, and enforcing the controls are performing their duties with diligence and thoroughness, or the established processes are rendered ineffective. I think I've worked very hard to be clear how important I felt the controls were. And as a council, we even revised our ethics policy, calling for each of us to be mindful of what the ICMA rules were of ethics, MML. We revised our whistleblower process to encourage discussion. And I think council owns this, and we own the corrections, and we own evaluating ourselves and our behaviors that set the tone at the top that, to me, cried out very clearly as to where the problems stand. And I hope each of us as council members will really reflect, dive into this report, think about our role as oversight partners, because We had a city staff and a whistleblower who absolutely did her job. She did it. She was the firewall. And we have to be mindful of the best environment is one in which people feel they can speak up. And it's clear we created an environment where people felt they no longer could speak up. And that's not who we are. That's not who the city of Troy is. I've worked here for a number of years, and I know that's not who we are. So I hope we will lock arms to restore that on behalf of our residents, on behalf of our businesses, and on behalf of the staff members who clearly were working with all due diligence to perform their jobs according to the controls that are in place. They're important, they're valuable. It doesn't matter if it's $5 or thousands of dollars. The second we start down a path, we have trouble. We can never, ever look the other way. We have to take these things seriously and work together with one another in good faith. Those are just my thoughts after diving into the report itself.
Thank you. Any other comments on the reports that are in the agenda packet? Thank you. There is a closed session. Oh, Mayor Pro Tem Baker.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. P2C, the forensic engagement report, I had some time to digest it after having our meeting Wednesday evening, and after listening to the comments my fellow council members made at the meeting on Wednesday, I watched the video again, and listening to public comment and receiving emails and phone calls from residents today, I am of the firm belief that the community does not believe that this council has properly handled this situation. No matter how hard we try to remedy it and move forward and look forward, I do believe there is still some kind of stink, for lack of a better word. And I struggled with what to actually do about that. We've talked about things a lot from up here. We've had residents come up. We've individually spoken about it. And I read the report, and it talks about a tone at the top and a culture of complicity. And as Councilwoman Abraham stated last Wednesday, the buck does stop here with us, and it is incumbent on us to take responsibility and to, I believe, determine if there was any other wrongdoing by any of us, or what roles we individually may have played or may not have played. And I'm not sure exactly how to do that, but I want to make it clear, I don't think this is about any one of us in particular. I don't think any one of us should have a finger pointed more heavily at this point, but I do believe that some mechanism needs to happen, or something needs to happen, where all of us that were on council while Brian Kishnick was city manager and while the Lang report happened and through his tenure in March of 2018, all of us should be somehow investigated by some means to show what role we may have played in any kind of intimidation or any kind of aggressive behavior or anything that supported Brian Kishnick's behavior in City Hall. A question for city management, or maybe the city attorneys. City attorney, are you, obviously I know our charter allows for investigation. We've talked about that up here a little bit before, and I'm not making any motion or resolution tonight for anything along those lines. But I would hope that I could at least get consensus from council to maybe have some kind of information provided from the city manager or the city attorney's office as to what potential options could be to look into council members' conduct as it related to Brian Kishnick. I think the community would like to know. I think that for all of us, hopefully it would show nothing, and we could maybe actually then move on at that point. But as long as there continues to be the cloud of this culture of complicity and the tone at the top, and this report talks about the finance director, but other officials as well. Who are those other officials? Was it any one of the 7 of us? If we can look at the players involved, then we can all say proudly and confidently, okay, this is what we found, and it's time to turn that page and try to get back to doing things the way they should be done in Troy. I don't know if MML offers any services. I don't know if there's any other ethics boards. I certainly am not in favor, let me make it very clear, of spending tens and tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars. I know that this could be a very broad thing, but I'm curious if you could, if there is consensus, provide us with any information as to what a possible plan could look like or something, at least so we could at least deliberate on that and figure out the best way to do it. So I ask for consensus from my fellow council members to hopefully clear all of us from any further wrongdoing and move forward.
Councilman Pennington.
Well, along those lines, I'd have a question for City Attorney Bloom. When Plant Moran interviewed those 16 people, did those people think that those comments would be available to council or to others, or was that all confidential, or do we know at this time?
I don't know the answer to that, but I suspect that there were no recordings done. So I do know that that is clear from the Plant Moran. They made that clear at the last city council meeting, special council meeting. So I'm not sure how. Are you asking that question so that that would also be something that was available? I'm not sure that.
Well, if he's calling for an investigation, I think that should be part of it. I mean, if those are available.
There, we don't have. I mean, the notes would not. They would be an internal work product. Plant Moran is not likely to give us their notes. There are no recordings, to the best of my knowledge. They did indicate that. So I'm not sure that that's something that could happen. And just in the meantime, I did look, the charter provision, section 4.8, it does cover investigations. However, there are no details as far as how that happens. I'm happy if there is consensus to look into it, but I suspect what it would involve is retaining another attorney to do that work.
Mayor, I have a follow-up.
Sure.
We spent almost $70,000, so I would not be in support of hiring another attorney and spending additional amounts of money on this. But if we have consensus to keep spending money, I guess that would, I would not be in agreement with that. But it'd be up to Councilman Baker, I guess.
Councilman Henderson.
The irony should not be lost on anybody that Councilman Baker texted me this afternoon indicating that he was going to run against me as mayor. So this is just plainly politics at its finest. So be prepared. You're going to hear a lot more of this. And I'll be the first to say, anybody that wants to bring an investigation, and this is directed at Councilman Hamilton, Councilman Baker, and anybody else that thinks I've been involved in any kind of wrongdoing, bring on an attorney at the FBI, the sheriff, anybody that you think you need to, sit me down and we will have a one-on-one conversation about anything that you think that I've been involved in. Bring it on. So if you want to spend all that money and all that time and all those resources, I'm an open book. I've never hid from anything on Facebook. Come and visit my Facebook page, ask me a question, I will answer it. This is politics, plain and simple. It's an election year. It's going to happen November 5th. You make your call as to whether you want somebody who colludes to vote no on a guy's severance package for whatever reason or not. I don't even understand that vote tonight. So this is the kind of gamesmanship that we're going to be faced with for the next couple of months. So enjoy, people. This is what we're headed for.
Anyone else wish to speak before Mayor Pro Tem Baker speaks again?
Mayor.
Councilwoman Hoderick.
The topic is clearly about malfeasance and nonfeasance and making sure it's not out there. And there are still questions that have come at me as well for reasons I don't understand in terms of regarding oversight attempts. So I too would welcome any opportunity. It might even be a professional organization like Mayor Pro Tem Baker mentioned, perhaps the MML, and maybe there aren't options. We are on such unprecedented ground, and I will not dismiss it as just politics. This is the business of running a very important city with high integrity. We lose our integrity, everything else falls apart. We need to really fight to restore it. And our staff has been put through scrutiny, both by the investigation we did in 2016 and the latest. Having the auditors come in, anybody who's been audited knows that is not a good time for anyone. We have been asked questions that don't get answered clearly or easily, and in fact, we hear words of we're not accountable to one another. We are accountable to one another. And I think we need to demonstrate that we are evaluating ourselves and what we can be doing better to go forward. And I don't know that there is a precedent for this, City Attorney. But the self-scrutiny, I'd welcome it. I'd love it. I'd love for the residents to know where we stand in that and to be able to demonstrate that we are working very hard. We're going to have training. We can also reflect maybe through that process on behaviors that contributed to a culture of complicity. It's a no-brainer to not want to be complicit with anything that smacks of malfeasance, misconduct, frankly, corruption. I won't be complicit, and I won't be forced into it as well. It's not dirty politics. It's doing the hard work of oversight and rebuilding trust. I think I would welcome it. Any clearing of the air.
Councilman Hamilton.
There's a quote in the forensic audit that someone suspected that council members were aware of what Kishnick's doing. This is a quote. And that they were allowing him to do it. And that quote just is stunning. We don't know if it's true. And I don't understand how it's politics if I think Mayor Pro Tem Baker said every council member would be investigated. Now, I was only on council for 4 months while Kishnick was here, but I don't see how that's unreasonable given everything that's been unearthed, given a third-party report has accusations in there that are pretty troubling. I think we can't just keep brushing things under the rug.
Councilwoman Abraham.
Thank you, Mayor. Plant Moran made it very clear that the culture of complicity, the tone at the top, was a leading factor in the misbehavior. It fed the misbehavior. The report is not flattering to council as a body, and residents are rightfully upset. My phone has been blowing up since last Wednesday. If residents are skeptical that the culture of complicity no longer exists, it's understandable. I don't know how we address that until we understand what that culture of complicity looks like. So, Councilman Baker's suggestion for all of us to be looked at seems even-keeled to me. May not be flattering to any or all of us. But I don't know how else we can address the top concerns that Plant Moran had. They took an objective look. They gave us the recommendations. We need to act on it. So if Councilman or Mayor Pro Tem Baker's suggestion is unpalatable, is there something better that we can do? I can't offer forth a better suggestion. I think, and maybe this is a clarifying question, I think what your request is, or what you're looking for consensus on is, what options do we have, cost effective, to do this sort of evaluation of all of us? And I think that's what you were asking for. It wasn't to authorize an investigation. It was just to understand what's out there that
Correct.
could be done.
Correct.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. I can't think of a better way to get at it, and granted, I haven't had a lot of time to think about it. It's only been a few minutes, but
Sure.
it seems reasonable. and I would support it. I would support understanding what options would be available and possibly what costs might be associated with those options. We don't know what we don't know. Let's get some suggestions. Let's have the conversation, and let's be open and honest about it, because the Plant Moran findings aren't about 2016, it's about 2019. The other thing that I'd like to address is the comment was made about collusion, and I don't even know how to address that. If I vote the same way as the mayor, am I colluding with the mayor? If I vote the same way with Mayor Pro Tem Baker, am I colluding with him? I think these are it's a very dangerous accusation to make, and I would ask all of my council members to exercise caution and show each other the respect that we would want to see in each other. So just to be clear, I have not colluded with anyone on any of my votes. I think about each item that comes to the table very carefully. I form my own opinions. I do my research, and I make my decisions on my own. And I've been pretty consistent in my 4 years here. And I don't think anything I've said or done tonight, or the last meeting, or any meeting in the past 4 years have been inconsistent with each other. So my votes, my opinions are my own, and I want to be very clear on that point.
Thank you. You know what's difficult here is that all of these people are really good people, and have just tried to do something for their city and their civic duty, and they don't get paid anything, and they're good people. They're all good people. And I think what hurts is that when somebody has an accusation made against them that makes you angry, because you're not that person. But how do you convince people that you haven't done anything wrong when people keep poking and kind of making it look like you've done something wrong? And I don't know how you get rid of that. I really don't know. I'm not opposed to asking the city attorney or Mr. Miller to, talk to us about avenues that could be researched. But innuendos and accusations and baseless finger pointing, I'm not sure how you ever get rid of that, as long as that's going to be continually brought up all the time. So, if there is something out there that can address a rumor or can address other than somebody saying, I didn't do anything wrong, I don't know what more you can do. You're put in a position where the people that are, against you and that dislike you, it doesn't matter what you say. Really, it doesn't matter what you say. But I can tell you this. I've been gone for a week, and I didn't get an opportunity to be here Wednesday to listen to the report and the comments and the stuff. But, Councilwoman Abraham, I read in the paper what she said, and I agree with her 100%. The buck stops up here at this table. We're all responsible for what happened. I maintained to this day that we gave somebody a second chance and it didn't work out. And it's easy to say that was a mistake and we shouldn't have done that, but I can tell you this, I've been part of an organization here in the city where we've given people a second chance and it's worked out, and we've given people a second chance and it didn't work out. And I think everybody here, there were things going on that we did not know about, okay? And I think if some of the things would have been brought to us that were lingering that we weren't aware of, this would have been a different scenario. I'm very confident of that. And I'm also confident that nobody up here at this table did anything wrong. And I think it's a shame that we have to continue to defend ourselves, because nobody that I know of, these are good people that are sitting next to me that just want to help their city. But I'll go along if somebody could think of something that could satisfy innuendos and speculations and finger pointing. I don't know if there's anything out there for that, quite honestly. But if we could just wrap this up. I think there's consensus. If you can think of something out there that you can relate to us, that, you know, I guess we can all put our thinking cap on and see if there's something out there.
Yeah,
I think that's what we're asking for, is just see if there's something out there.
Just briefly.
Sure.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, it's not to spend any more money. It's to have ideas to find out so we can make a reasonable decision as to what could be done. It's not to point fingers at any specific person. It's really not. You may or may not believe that.
I don't.
That's unfortunate, but maybe, you know, I was very clear that I was talking about all of us and not any one of us. Frankly, I don't think, well, this is not about, it also is uncomfortable for me that every time a decision comes up or comments get made that someone doesn't like, we have to, oh, it's all about politics all of a sudden. It doesn't always have to be all about politics. Sometimes it's about doing the right thing for your city and for your community that, as the mayor just said, we all care about and are trying to do our best to take care of. So I appreciate the consensus to at least have some options provided for us. I think that it would do a lot of good to at least know that we're trying, based on what this report says, that we should be looking into some of these things. We may not be able to ever solve them completely, but if we don't try, what does that say about us as a body? Thank you.
Councilman Pennington.
Just quickly, City Manager Miller, how long did it take for Plant Moran to get us this report from first request to last Wednesday, approximately?
Can you repeat that?
6 months, maybe.
It was August.
8 months.
8 months?
8 months.
8 months.
So I wouldn't want anything to last that long, and like I conveyed my point earlier, I wouldn't want us to cost very, very little internal time, or whatever the least amount we could spend as possible, because like I said, we've already spent $70,000, and something less than 8 months is what I would want to look for. What's that?
It's practically a pregnancy.
Okay. We have a closed session that we need to go to, and then after the closed session, there's a resolution to come back to either adjourn or have a resolution about what happened in closed session. So we are in recess, and we will reconvene in the boardroom.